number of you are here for Committee of Adjustment matters. So we look forward to hearing from you then, but you'll have to bear with us as we get through some of the formalities first. So I will now proceed to read the land acknowledgement for open session of council here on Wednesday, March 9th. As some of you may note, yesterday was International Women's Day, and I know a number of members of the community through a variety of different forums had the opportunity to recognize and celebrate the day. And for some, it's International Women's Day week. So happy International Women's Day. I know everyone is being muted if you're here for Committee of Adjustment or for rezoning matters as it pertains to council, but we will begin with our land acknowledgement. The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe people. We honor this historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who now call North Grenville home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation. Colleagues, we've already approved the agenda as amended, so I'm going to go quickly to consent agenda items. You'll note that under the consent agenda items, there's just one matter, and that is the council meeting minutes from February 9th. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for matters on our consent agenda. Councillor Strachan, a seconder, please. Councillor O'Sullivan. Any discussion on the minutes from Feb 9th? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please. Thank you. That matter carries. Under reports, we're going to go straight to planning and development. And I'm going to turn it, I think, to Ms. Martin. She's noted that by virtue of the departure of former Deputy Mayor and Councillor Jim McManaman, we in fact created a vacancy subsequent to the appointment of Ms. Debbie Wilson, who joins us this evening. We are now looking to make that appointment of Ms. Deb Wilson to our Committee of Adjustment, as has been the case for quite some time in the municipality of North Grenville. All members of council sit on the Committee of Adjustment. Ms. Martin, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add that under the Planning Act, we have to appoint the committee annually when the committee is comprised of members of council. So this bylaw is coming before you tonight, one, to appoint the rest of the members of council, but also to add Councillor Wilson to the membership of the Committee of Adjustment. Not much to add at this point. It's just a matter of housekeeping, and we'll be able to proceed with the Committee of Adjustment following the passing of this bylaw.
Okay, so then I'll look for a mover and a seconder that council approve and enact bylaw 1922 to appoint the members of the Committee of Adjustment for the year 2022. I'll need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Barkley, a seconder, please. Councillor Strachan. Any discussion, colleagues? I don't see any, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Good, thank you. So at this point, upon the appointment of the Committee of Adjustment for 2022, I think we are now recessing our council meeting and we are going to go into our Committee of Adjustment meeting. Do I have that right, Ms. Martin? Okay, so I'm just going to pull our agenda for our Committee of Adjustment, and I understand we have 4 public meetings this evening in regards to zoning matters, or variations, I should say, not zoning matters. So I'm going to welcome Ms. Martin to kick off this meeting for us in terms of any of the formalities before we get into the public meeting. Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will have Secretary Treasurer Debbie Wood take us through the resolutions, and she will also read out the public notices ahead of each meeting.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We can start by declaring the meeting open at 6:43. And we'd like to approve the minutes of February 9th, 2022 as circulated. mover and a seconder.
I'll move.
Sorry. Councilor Sullivan, sorry. Any disclosures of interest? Moving on. So the Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public meeting to consider application number A0122 for lands located at 877 River Road, Part Lot 8, Concession 1, Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the Municipality of North Grenville, to permit an attached garage. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed minor variance application. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before the committee makes a decision on the proposed variance application, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. I, Debbie Wood, Secretary Treasurer, will keep a record summary of this meeting. Any persons who wish further notice of the committee's decisions concerning the matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to myself, Secretary Treasurer, following adjournment of this public meeting. Are there people here for this public meeting? And if so, could you please acknowledge?
Okay, we're not seeing anyone, Ms. Wood.
Stephen Anthony.
Oh, Anthony, I apologize. Anthony is here. Okay, welcome, Anthony. So then we'll turn it over to Ms. Martin to make the presentation. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Martin.
So share my screen here.
Sorry, I didn't realize I could unmute myself. I thought you guys had muted me.
Perfect. All right. So this first application we have on the docket tonight is A0122. It's for 877 River Road. So there are multiple variance requests that are being sought for this application. And I'm going to walk through them and explain the rationale behind each of the variances, and then walk you through the property characteristics and provide you with the proposed development. So there's 4 sections of our zoning bylaw that relief is being sought from. The first is from section 6.21 DI of the bylaw to reduce the minimum required setback from a wetland boundary from 30 meters to 13.8 meters, to provide relief from section 6.22B to reduce the minimum required setback from 30 meters to 13.8 meters from the top of bank of a watercourse, and to provide relief from section 6.22.3A to reduce the minimum required setback from the Rideau Canal National Historic Site from 30 meters to 13.8 meters, and to also provide relief from section 9.2, which is our rural zoning provisions, to reduce the interior yard setback from 6 meters to 3.5 meters. So the property is located just to the east of Birds Rapids on River Road. And as you can see by the aerial, the property is currently developed with a single detached dwelling. So the recognition of the setbacks tonight will actually recognize the setbacks as to where the existing house is from the river. And the proposed development, as you will see in this next slide, is actually going to be further from the water than the existing dwelling itself. So the applicants are proposing to build a garage attached with a breezeway and a porch. The entirety of the building envelope itself exists within the 30-meter setback of the Rideau River. So we typically try to maintain and keep development at least a minimum of 30 meters from the waterway. However, we do recognize that this is an existing house, and so there are existing circumstances to be considered when considering the minor variance. So the proposed accessory garage and the porch breezeway will be located further away from the Rideau River, as mentioned. The property is zoned rural and it is surrounded by other rural residential land uses. So the stretch of River Road is quite populated by single detached dwellings. The variance, as mentioned, will recognize the existing setback to the Rideau River of the existing house and its footprint. And the setback reduction from the interior side yard is appropriate and will not adversely impact the neighboring property. There is an existing tree line between the two properties, which helps reduce that impact. And as part of their application, the applicants did submit a slope stability study to the RVCA, which has been reviewed. And we did receive comments from the RVCA that they have no objections to this application and just requested a notice of decision. And the garage itself will maintain a setback of 16.7 meters. So again, just really reiterating the fact that we're not moving closer to the river, we're actually moving a little further away than what exists. So staff are recommending tonight that the committee support the multiple variances to permit the construction of the accessory garage and breezeway porch. The request is considered minor as it maintains the intent of the comprehensive zoning bylaw and official plan, and the reduced setbacks are appropriate in the rural designation. We did not receive any comments from any of the neighboring property owners, and as mentioned, the RVCA has been involved from the start of this project and provided that they have no objections. And with that, we will turn it over to members of the committee to ask questions first. The representative for the applicant is here tonight. Should you have any questions for them?
Okay, colleagues, any questions on this particular application? None? Oh, we do have one from Councillor Barkley. Councillor Barkley, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A typical drainage question is with the reduction in the side setback, I'm assuming that proper, drainage with increased roof coverage is accommodated. Rideau Valley would say something about that, I imagine.
So approvals are required from the RVCA to permit the development of the site. And even with the addition, the property is still at just under, it's I think 13% lot coverage and the maximum is 15%. So there's still lots of adequate open space to accommodate runoff on the property.
Great, thank you.
And Ms. Martin, to be clear, were there any objections expressed about this particular variance?
No concerns were raised from any members of the
perfect.
public.
Great. Okay, colleagues, anything else? Anthony, is there anything you'd like to say?
No. Amy explained it fairly well.
Okay.
I don't really have much to add.
Okay, and I apologize. I don't see your last name on the screen, or I would address you by your last name.
You might not have been able to pronounce it anyways.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to ask Ms. Debbie Wood then to read the recommendation, and I'll look for a mover and a seconder from council colleagues.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Be it resolved that the committee approve application A0122 for the following minor variance on the lands located at 877 River Road, Part Lot 8, Concession 1, Geographic Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the municipality of North Grenville. 1, to provide relief from section 6.21 DI of the comprehensive zoning bylaw 5012 to reduce the minimum required setback from a wetland boundary from 30 meters to 13.8 meters. 2, to provide relief from section 6.22B to reduce the minimum required setback from 30 meters to 13.8 meters from the top of bank, and to provide relief from section 6.223A to reduce the minimum required setback from the Rideau Canal National Historic Site from 30 meters to 13.8 meters. And finally, to provide relief from section 9.2 to reduce the side yard setback from 6 meters to 3.5 meters to permit the attached garage.
Okay, that's the motion. I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move it.
Councillor O'Sullivan, Councillor Barkley, thank you. Any further comments or questions, colleagues? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good, it passes. Thank you, Anthony, again for being with us this evening. Happy that you can proceed with the work on your property. All the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you, council.
Okay,
Have a good
take
night.
care.
You too.
Have a good night. Okay, Ms. Wood, we'll go on to the next item, please.
So the Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public meeting to consider application A0222 for lands located at 490 Donahue Road, Part Lot 5, Concession 4, Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the municipality of North Grenville, to permit a detached garage. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed minor variance application. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submission, Before the committee makes a decision on the proposed variance application, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. I, Debbie Wood, Secretary Treasurer, will keep a record summary of this meeting. Any persons who wish further notice of the committee's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to myself, Secretary Treasurer, following adjournment of this public meeting. Are there any people here for this public meeting? And if so, could you please acknowledge?
Ms. Wood, I don't see anyone. Now there's someone trying to connect to audio. Might this be the person? Mr. Al Faisley? Okay. Anyway, we'll proceed, and if we have someone, of course, we will acknowledge them. And Ms. Martin, were you expecting anyone for the public meeting?
I hadn't been made aware of anybody, Your Worship, who had indicated interest, and it'll be Deputy Director Lanstra providing the presentation.
Over to you, Ms. Lanstra.
Thank you. So good evening to the committee and to the public in attendance. I'm just going to see if I can, whoa. Here, we'll continue here. So good evening to everyone in attendance. Before you is application A2-22, a minor variance application for 490 Donahue Road. So the landowner is requesting to construct a 2-story residential garage on the subject lands. The second floor would provide needed storage to support the existing residential use. The minor variance requested is to provide relief for the height maximum for the bylaw for a residential accessory structure from 6 meters, which is 19.7 feet, to 7.2 meters, which is 23 feet, 6.5 inches. The subject lands are located on Donahue Road with surrounding rural residential and rural uses. The lands are designated rural within the official plan, and they're zoned rural within the comprehensive zoning bylaw. The subject lands are heavily wooded with the development footprint being screened from both the road frontage and the neighboring landowners. So you'll notice with this mapping, it does show that there are 2 parcels, but the landowner has actually merged those 2 parcels together, and they are in fact one parcel of land, which provides more lot area to buffer the proposed structure. So the star on this slide before you shows the proposed location for the structure. So this clearly shows that the existing vegetation on the subject lands will screen the proposed structure. So where that structure is located, it's approximately 40 meters to the landowner that's to the north. It's about 70 meters to the road frontage, and it is further back from the neighbor to the south than the existing house is currently. So the profile construction drawing submitted with the application shows a typical garage with an additional upper story. To meet the comprehensive zoning bylaw, the applicant requires an additional 1.2 meters, approximately 4 feet, for height of the building. And the structure meets all other zone requirements for the rural zone. So the minor variance before you does meet the 4 tests outlined for the Planning Act. The application is minor in nature. The request will not be a noticeable variance from the road frontage or from any other neighboring parcels. The application does meet the intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan. The use is permitted within all of the local planning documents, and the general proposal meets all provisions save and except the height request before you. The application is appropriate and represents good planning. The applicant has selected a location where there's no anticipated impacts from the variance. The application provides the applicant with the ability to support the residential use while also maintaining the integrity of our local planning documents and also with the county documents. So staff recommend the minor variance be granted to allow for an increase in height for the residential accessory structure from the 7.2 meters or up to, the 7.2 meters for 23 feet, 6.5 inches. Because it is minor in nature, it meets the intent of our planning documents and it represents good planning. So that is everything for this file. I am available to answer any questions should the committee have any. Thank you.
So colleagues, any questions? I see Councillor O'Sullivan. Go ahead, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation through you, Madam Mayor. to Crystal Langstra. I just wanted to clarify. So it says a 2-story residential detached garage, but in fact, it is not residential. It's just a garage with a second level on it that would not be used as a residence or could be used as a residence?
So through the chair to Councillor O'Sullivan, yes, the way I'm using residential here is that it's actually an accessory structure that supports an existing residential use. It is not living space for a residential dwelling.
Okay.
So yes, so it's just a structure, or it is just storage space on top of an accessory structure that will support the single detached dwelling that's located on the property.
Okay. Is it something that could be developed into a residential space if they ever chose to down the road?
Through
Even the extra
chair
height?
to the committee, yes. So it would, the additional residential unit bylaw provisions that we approved would apply. So as long as they met all of those provisions, it would be something that they could do in the future.
Okay.
But from as far as we're aware, that's not what is currently being proposed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else, colleagues? Seeing none, I will look for a mover and a seconder for the motion that Ms. Wood is about to read. Ms. Wood, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So be it resolved that the committee approve application A0222 for the following minor variance on the lands located at 490 Donahue Road, Part Lot 5, Concession 4, Geographic Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the municipality of North Grenville, to provide relief from section 6.1.7 of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 5012 to increase the permitted height of an accessory structure from 19.7 feet to 23 feet and 6.5 inches to permit a detached garage.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm just going to confirm, I'll look for that mover and a seconder, please. I know someone raised their hand. Councillor Wilson, a seconder, please. Councillor Barkley. I am just going to make sure that the applicant is not present with us in the event that they would like to say something. Not seeing anyone. Obviously, the staff recommendation is to support the applicant. So we'll call the question unless there are other comments or concerns from council colleagues. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. So that motion passes and the applicant has been successful in securing their variance. So best of luck to the applicant, and we'll move on, Ms. Wood, to our third committee variance application this evening, application variance this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public meeting to consider application number A0322 for lands located at 2305 River Road, Part Lot 8, Concession 1, Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the municipality of North Grenville, to permit a single detached dwelling, single family dwelling. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed minor variance application. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before the committee makes a decision on the proposed variance application, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Debbie Wood, Secretary Treasurer, will keep a running record summary of this meeting. Any persons who wish further notice of the committee's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to myself following adjournment of this public meeting. Are there any people here for this public meeting? And if so, could you please acknowledge?
Hi, it's Lisa and Mike.
Hi, Lisa and Mike, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to proceed with the staff presentation, and then if you would like to comment or if any member of council has questions, we'll certainly give you the opportunity to respond. Sound good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so over to, is it Ms. Lanstra or Ms. Martin on this one?
I'll be taking this one, Your Worship.
Okay, proceed,
Great.
please.
So our third application tonight is for 2305 River Road. And the variance that's being requested is to provide relief from section 6.22B, which is to reduce the minimum required setback from 30 meters to 25.13 meters from the top of bank of a watercourse. So the property is located on River Road across from the Settlers Grant subdivision. And as you can see, it's currently undeveloped. It is a relatively large lot, but there are some constraints in regards to setbacks from watercourses that are being sought tonight. And it's hard, this map shows it better, but you can see that there's actually a watercourse that runs along the property line. And that is the watercourse that we'll be dealing with the variance for tonight. And here's the proposed development on site. So the applicants are seeking to construct a single detached dwelling on the property, and there'd be an accessory shop at the front. And this line on the map here denotes this is the 30-meter setback from this watercourse. So as you can see here, there's a corner of the house that will occupy that space, but a majority of the development will be located outside, and they pushed it as far as they can over to the eastern property line to accommodate the development. As mentioned, the single detached dwelling and the accessory structure will be located a minimum of 30 meters from the Rideau River. So the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority has been involved from the start of this application process, and have provided considerable feedback on the development of the site to the applicants. And one of the items in which, because we're dealing with new development on a lot, is that the RVCA was very adamant that we, the municipality and the applicant, ensure that the new development be constructed outside of the 30-meter setback to the Rideau River, but that we could consider a slightly reduced setback to that secondary water course that is on the western property line. So the request tonight is to reduce the setback to that western property line where that water course is down to 25.13 meters from 30 meters. And so staff are recommending that the committee supports the variance to permit the construction of the single detached dwelling. The variance is considered minor, and it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan. We did not receive any comments from any neighboring property owners. And as mentioned, the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority has been involved. They have no objections, and they have requested notice of decision, and additional permits will be required from the RVCA to support the development of this project at the building permit stage. So at this time, I'll take questions from members of the committee, and I do note that the Charlebois are here this evening in attendance, should there be any questions for them regarding their project.
So council colleagues, you've heard the presentation. Are there any questions in regards to the application? Is there anything that the Charlebois would like to add to what Ms. Martin has presented? This is a public meeting and you have that opportunity should you wish.
No, we've just, I think Amy and Debbie have covered this very well for us. So we're looking forward to accepting this, this variance. It would be awesome. Thank you very much.
And if I might, how long have you been working on the variance?
I guess, well, our first meeting was in January with Phil Mosier, but it's been a while that we've been trying to figure out how to place the house so that we could be within the setback as far as the survey showed us. And it just, it was difficult to fit the whole idea in, but we did, if we can just get that 5-meter variance.
Understood.
Thank you.
Well, it seems that you obviously have good staff support this evening, and I know how hard our planning staff work to be innovative and to see merits and good applications. So it's great to see that come forward tonight. I don't see any hands up from council colleagues. Are there any other members of the public here this evening? Seeing none, I think then we can, am I correct about that? There were no other members of the public, Ms. Wood, who are here to comment on this file?
For this file, I don't believe.
Okay. So Ms. Wood, would you mind then reading the recommendation, and I'll ask for a mover and a seconder once you have.
Thank you, Your Worship. Be it resolved that the committee approve application A0322 for the following minor variance. on the lands located at 2305 River Road, Part Lot 23, Concession 1, Geographic Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the municipality of North Grenville, to provide relief from Section 6.22A of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 5012, to reduce the setback from the normal high water mark of a watercourse from 30 meters to 25.13 meters to permit a single-family dwelling.
Excellent. So mover and a seconder, please.
I will.
Councillor O'Sullivan, the second, Councillor, please. Oh, Councillor Strachan, thank you. Any further comments or questions?
Just
Seeing none.
wondering, are they planning to build this year, Lisa? Are you planning to start your construction as soon as you can?
Yes, as soon as we can. Our builder now has room for us to start, as soon as we can get permits.
Great. Well,
Yes.
all the best to you.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to it.
You already live in North Grenville?
No, we actually live in Greeley, so
Oh.
it's a big move for us, but my parents live right next door, so we're looking very forward to helping them along with their later years in life.
Good, good.
Yeah, great.
Welcome to North Grenville.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. We see lots of interest in North Grenville in both rural and urban parts of our community, and that's always of great comfort to us. So we look forward to welcoming you, certainly once your house is built as well. I'm going to call the question on this one. I know we have one other applicant waiting. All in favor, council colleagues, please. Good. That motion passes, and we thank the applicants for being here this evening and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much once again. Really
Okay.
appreciate your time.
Take care.
You too.
Ms. Witt, on to our last one. Thank you.
Your worship. The Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public meeting to consider application number A0422 for lands located at 146 George Street West, Part Lot 26, Concession 3, Town of Kempville, now the municipality of North Grenville, to permit a semi-detached dwelling unit, including 2 additional residential units inside. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns that you have with respect to the proposed minor variance application. If an appellant does not provide oral submission at this public meeting or written submission before the committee makes a decision on the proposed variance application, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. I, Debbie Wood, Secretary Treasurer, will keep a record summary of this meeting. Any persons who wish further notice of the committee's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to myself following adjournment of this public meeting. Are there any people here for this public meeting? And if so, could you please acknowledge?
I'm here. It's Matt Wetzel.
Welcome, Mr. Wetzel.
Thank you.
So then we will go to Ms. Landstra or Ms. Martin for the presentation, please.
That'll be me, your worship.
Okay.
So our final variance application being considered tonight is for 146 George Street West. And the relief is being sought is from section 14.2.1 of our comprehensive zoning bylaw to reduce the required frontage per dwelling unit for a semi-detached dwelling from 9 meters to 7.5 meters. So the property is located just east of the intersection of George Street West and Pine Hill Road. It is an existing lot of record and it has a current frontage of 15 meters. Around the property, you will see there is the Country Walk subdivision to the east. So as I'll go to the aerial, as you can see, there are multiple townhouse units. There's a condominium building here at 140 George Street. This is a semi-detached dwelling unit, and there's a multi-residential unit across the street. So in this area, we're already seeing evidence of higher density, medium to high density residential uses. The property is zoned residential second density, which permits a semi-detached dwelling unit. And here's the proposed layout for the property. There would be 2 semi-detached units, and in each unit there would be an additional residential unit, which meets the intent of our additional residential unit zoning provisions within our zoning bylaw. So the property, as mentioned, is zoned residential second density, which permits a semi-detached dwelling. It will, as mentioned, they will also contain an additional residential unit in each semi. The property meets all the other setback requirements and lot coverage for the residential second density zone. And as mentioned, there's already existing medium to high density residential uses in the area. And I included the chart from the planning report, which shows the breakdown of the residential second density zoning provisions and where the property can meet all the other zoning provisions and where it doesn't meet the minimum frontage per dwelling unit. And I just want to note, when it comes to the side yard setback, our zoning bylaw does have provisions where there is an attached garage in the unit that you can reduce the setback to 1.2 meters on the side yards.
Okay.
Yeah, so the staff are recommending support of the requested variance to permit the construction of a semi-detached dwelling because it meets the general intent of the comprehensive zoning bylaw and official plan. And the lot frontage is considered desirable and appropriate in the residential designation. So the municipality did receive comments. 2 emails came in regards to the proposed developments objecting to the lot frontage. The reduction, one individual stated that the proposed reduction is a major change to the property, and another concern was raised over the impact of drainage to the property just to the east. So the subject property, as mentioned, is zoned to permit a semi-detached dwelling already. The existing lot of record has an existing frontage of 15 meters. So they're not able to meet the provision. So a variance is being sought in this case to recognize the existing conditions of the property. The municipality has supported reduced frontages on a per dwelling unit basis previously. And these are 2 examples that were pulled out in regards to semi-detached dwelling units. We on 111 George Street West, which is a more recent application that came forward. The municipality permitted a frontage of 7.6 meters per dwelling unit. And in the Temple subdivision, the semi-detached units have a minimum lot frontage of 6.5 meters. In our newer developments, we're starting to see this trend towards smaller units and towards smaller frontages to accommodate those units as a means of trying to provide more housing affordability. And so that's where, in part, that we're starting to see those requests to reduce the frontage. Similarly, council will recall with even the Equinell development in phase 5, when we did the zoning, even the townhouse units had much more reduced frontages just to accommodate more units within the area. So the property at 146 George West, again, is that existing lot of record. So that's why the frontage is 15 meters and not at 18. And I just wanted to note in the item that was raised in regards to drainage is that we typically ask for a grading and drainage plan for the property at building permit submission. We have received a building permit application, but I didn't get a chance before the meeting, as I received the comments late today, to verify that staff have received and reviewed such. But if that is a concern of the committee, I do recommend that as a condition of the variance, which you have the ability to add conditions to variances, that the applicant submits and provides a grading and drainage plan for municipal approval at the building permit stage. I will also recognize that the applicants are in attendance tonight, so perhaps they may be best to address whether or not they've met that criteria. From there, that's all that I've got for this evening to prepare on this application. And I'm willing to take questions from members of the committee. And then once members of the committee have asked their questions to staff, we'll open it up to the applicant and members of the public.
Okay. So with the applicants here, Ms. Martin, I'm just going to ask if they want to say anything at the front end, and then I'll go to Councillor Barkley.
Hi, good evening, Council.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm the applicant. My architect's supposed to be here. I'm sure that he wasn't able to log in, but I do know that he did submitted the drainage, like she mentioned. Yeah, it was being addressed at the planning stage, so they redesigned it. So it was already provided for.
Okay, thank you for those comments.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. I'm going to go to Councillor Barkley, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Director of Planning. The applicant has stated that they've submitted a grading and drainage plan, but we don't know yet whether it's been approved. Is it still appropriate to make it a condition of accepting this minor variance?
Let's have Ms. Martin comment on that. Ms. Martin?
Yep.
Through your worship, Councillor Barkley, it's really up to the committee if they want to add a condition. The comment that was received was quite late in the day, and I didn't have a chance to follow up with the inspector in charge of that file and that review. I will state that any grading and drainage plans that do come in are reviewed by our engineering coordinator and / drainage superintendent, and should they deem it not to meet this, standards, it is sent back for a revision. So we do have a process internally here that how they're reviewed and comments provided. And we wouldn't approve a building permit application that had inadequate grading and drainage when a plan has been submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, colleagues? Mr. Wetzel?
Yes. Yeah, I'm here.
Did you wish to make comment on this?
Yeah, I know there's processes, but just some more information on like the drainage in front of the condo building, which houses 12 units at 140 George Street to the immediate east. There's quite an elevation change. And the reason I'm speaking up, the condo corporation had to pay about $30,000 to put a French drain in on that property line. And there's quite a bit of water that pools down towards there, which is a safety concern for slipping when it all freezes. And then just the water is going to travel where it's going to travel, right? So, we're already mitigating a water issue down there. So with this unit up higher, with snow melting off of it and whatnot, that's my concern.
Ms. Martin, is there anything you can say in response at this stage?
Thank you, Your Worship. The impact in regards to drainage is that we cannot, no property owner can negatively impact and affect their drainage onto another lot. So the applicant and developer of the property would have to ensure that they've addressed the drainage and grading adequately, and that forms part of the applicable law under the building permit process. So that is where that it would be addressed, and it is evaluated.
So I'm assuming then that the condition of reviewing the drainage plan maybe just prudent given some concerns and anxieties about impact.
Definitely, and it just emphasizes the need to just to ensure that we do provide that review internally through our staff. We do have a drainage engineer superintendent on staff that does review these for us. So to that end, it's condition of the variance is just acknowledging that there needs to be an efficient drainage and grading plan that's approved prior to building permit issuance.
Okay. Any other comments, colleagues?
I just it's Matt again.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Wetzel.
Sorry. Is my understanding this is basically going to be a fourplex, the way they've worded that. Semi-detached, but 2 additional units inside that. Is that?
Well, we'll ask Ms. Martin to confirm. Ms. Martin?
So the development proposal is for a semi-detached with 2 additional residential units in the basement, which would be, I believe, walkout basements. So there will be a total of 4 units on that property.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
There is another building like that on, I believe it is on George Street, a semi-detached with the 2 additional residential units on like one on each side. Further down George Street, I think, further east on George Street from where that one is, I believe, that we approved within the last 3 years. And I don't think there's any issues with that one. I do have a question about the one other comment that the person could not attend tonight, but she submitted a concern. Was there anything specific about that concern, or was it just like she just said it wasn't acceptable, but I don't know why, what the concern was?
Okay, let's ask Ms. Martin, and I just want to acknowledge that I think I see Councillor Wilson's hand as well, but we'll have Ms. Martin speak to the concern that was expressed in writing.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Sullivan. So the note that was received from an individual who resides adjacent to the property noted that they felt that it was a major change on the property in regards to reducing the frontage requirements, but they provided no further elaboration on their concerns, just that they did not support the application to reduce the frontage per dwelling unit.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Ms. Wilson, please. Councillor Wilson.
Okay, I just wondered, Amy, would you be able to go back and show the layout of what they actually plan to build there?
Of course.
Please?
Yep.
I'll see if I can see it.
Through your worship to Councillor Wilson, this was circulated in the package for a larger version. It is very difficult on PowerPoint sometimes to portray these large development plans, but as you can see, and I've got a black bar above here, the control bar, so it's harder for me to see exactly what's up, but there's 7.5 meters from the road in. There will be garages as part of the building, as you can see here. Just gotta move things around. So here's just a rendering of what it would look like. So there would be parking available in the garage, and then a parking spot out in the front yard. The minimum front yard setback is 6 meters, so they exceed the minimum front yard setback requirements. As mentioned, there would be two additional residential units in the basements of each unit, and it is my understanding that the applicant is seeking at some point to sever the lot. So then you would create that distinct separation of title between the two properties.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with 4 units, there's adequate parking?
Yes, the parking met the standards of our zoning bylaw.
Okay. All right.
And the lot is quite deep. There is, as you can see here, at least 14 meters from the back of the unit to the back property line.
Okay. And what's the distance from the building, the current building that's there, the condominium building, to the backyard or the back of the lot? I can't see it. I didn't.
Yeah. So without the benefit of a survey, Councillor Wilson, of the neighboring property, I can't 100% say what that distance is from the 3-story to the property line, but the distance from the proposed the proposed semi-detached would be 1.4 meters to the interior side lot line. And as you noticed, just in the background here, that it is set for further forward compared to where the condo building is located.
Okay, thank you, Director Martin.
So, Ms. Martin, just a quick question. I don't see any other hands. With that obligation to ensure that, in fact, there is no impact on drainage of a neighboring property, no matter what the proximity, how do you actually ensure that there is an impact? Is it up to Mr. Wetzel and the condo corporation to closely watch developments? Where is the oversight or vigilance when it comes to concerns of that nature?
Thank you, Your Worship. So on the building permit side is where that mechanism lies. So we would have an approved grading and drainage plan that is approved by the municipality. And part of signing off on the building permit and closing the file is confirmation that the grading and drainage of the property conforms to the plan. So there is a standard and a sign off that's required through that process.
Okay, I see that perhaps Mr. Alfaisley is the applicant. Is that correct?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Actually,
okay, welcome.
I am the designer for the drainage and the surfacing for this project.
Okay.
I would like to mention that, I don't know why the neighbors are concerned about the drainage problem for this property, because the topography of the area shows that this lot have lower elevation than the others. So the water comes from neighbors to this land instead of going from this land to the other. And it was a big challenge to do the drainage for that. For that reason, we try to put the front yard and the roof of the building drain to the ditch at the front of the lot. And the backyard only, there's a ditch in the back there to drain to the water to underground water. So I don't think there's any problem with the drainage at all. And it will be under revision for the municipality, and they will give their final decision for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that additional explanation.
You're welcome.
And Ms. Martin, is that your understanding as well in terms of elevations?
I haven't reviewed, Your Worship, the elevation plans or the grading and drainage plans. That typically is done by our engineering coordinator, who is trained in being able to review and provide comment on those types of applications. So again, we do have the in-house expertise to review those, and it's part of our building permit process to ensure that grading and drainage is addressed, especially when we're dealing with our in-town lots and lots where you have existing developments.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? I think Ms. Martin has recommended that potential caveat, just because we haven't had the opportunity to hear from our drainage experts internally. I accept their Mr. Alfaisley may in fact, of course, be correct in terms of water flowing towards the property, not away from the property, but if there's a way to provide assurance to neighboring properties through a review of the drainage plan, that seems prudent. I'll go to Councillor Barkley. Councillor Barkley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I would agree with having that condition on the approval. I had a question regarding the drainage that Mr. Alfaisley might be able to answer, if I might, and that is the water in the back of the property. Will that be tied into the French drain of the condominium beside it?
Mr. Alfaisley, are you still with us?
Yes, thank you so much. No, actually, it's not connected with that. It will be connected to the wet tile. And there is a pump for the sump pit, and will pump to the ditch on the drainage ditch in the front of the building, front of the lot. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Colleagues, unless there's another question, I would ask. Oh, we have one from Councillor Sullivan. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to Director Martin and or the proposed developer. On this picture that you showed about the lot, it showed 2 laneways and then grassed area at the front, which therefore provides more area where the water can drain through. The one that I spoke of, which is further east on George Street, that has the semi-detached with the 2 additional units, the entire front of that house has been paved for parking. So there's no grass on that one further down. So obviously that would create more of a problem with runoff of water. So I'm just wanting to know for sure if there is going to be lawn dedicated lawn area in front of these two semi-detached without having the entire front lot paved.
Ms. Martin, can you comment on that further?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Sullivan. So our zoning bylaw does have provisions over how much of your lot frontage can be provided as driveway. But it wouldn't stipulate people who would put stonework, as often people will do for walkways into their house. But perhaps I can let the applicants just respond to what their plan is for landscaping the front of their development.
Mr. Alfaisley, or I guess Mr. Emuson, you'll go ahead.
Mr. Fassan, I think the engineer would probably be best to address that.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. For sure, put some of the front yard as grass is much better for the environment and also for the drainage for the any water. Instead of all of this, it will be paved. For sure, that will be much better.
Yeah, I know it's better. I just want to make sure that that you don't have any plans to pave the entire front for parking.
No, for sure not. This is the owner. Maybe it's better than but for our plan, no, it will be just the pavement for the driveway and the garage only. But for the other, it will be green. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, yes, we're definitely going to have a grass between the land.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Colleagues, anything else? Seeing not, perhaps Ms. Wood, I don't have the benefit of the slide on my screen, so if you don't mind reading that recommendation. And perhaps then Ms. Martin, you can add the language around review of the drainage plan as a condition. Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
Thank you. Be it resolved that the committee approve application A0422 for the following minor variance on the lands located at 146 George Street West, part lot 26, concession 3, geographic town of Kemptville, now the municipality of North Grenville. To provide relief from section 14.2.1 of the comprehensive zoning bylaw 5012 to reduce the minimum lot frontage from 9 meters to 7.5 meters to permit a semi-detached dwelling unit, including 2 additional residential units inside.
Excellent. And Ms. Martin, the language around the caveat, please.
And that, so your worship, we would amend the resolution to state on the with the condition that a grading and drainage plan be submitted to the municipality and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Okay, thank you. Can I look for a mover and a seconder, please? For the motion as read, including the addition around drainage plans. So I have Councillor Barkley. I need a seconder, please. Councillor Sullivan, thank you. Okay. Any further comments? I'll look to the applicants. Is there anything else you'd like to say at this time? I'm not seeing anything. Okay. Council colleagues, anything from you? I'll call the vote then. All in favor, please. Good. Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you very much to the applicant. And I think the engineering person who was here this evening, and we look forward to working with you. And I'm sure Ms. Martin and her team will be in touch.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
For sure. Take care. All the best. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
You too. So council colleagues, Ms. Wood, I believe we're getting close to the end for Committee of Adjustment.
That'd be correct. Your worship, we're just looking to adjournment.
Okay.
So we resolve that this meeting at the Municipality of North Grenville Committee of Adjustment do now adjourn at 7:37.
Okay, mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Barkley, Councillor Wilson, thank you. I do see a hand from Martine Saint Jean. Might that be someone here for our council meeting?
Excuse me, Your Worship, Mike Fortier. I was here for amendment application ZBA 0222.
Yes, that's coming up.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were
Yes.
reading the entire meeting. Sorry.
No, yes, to be clear, we have just finished our Committee of Adjustment meeting, and we'll be going into our zoning bylaw amendments as we resume council meeting, which will happen imminently, just in a couple of minutes. But thank you for asking that question. I'm going to call the vote on the motion to adjourn the Committee of Adjustment meeting, which will allow us to resume our council meeting. So colleagues, calling the question on adjournment of Committee of Adjustment only. All in favor? Good. Okay. So with that, we are now going to resume our council meeting this evening, which is where the zoning bylaw amendments will be considered. So just give me 1 second as I switch screens here. And yes, go ahead.
Have we lost Councillor Starker yet?
Has she disappeared from the screen?
Okay, she said
We're
she's
just admitting
logging-
her. We're just admitting her back in right now.
her laptop died. She's just coming back.
Apologies, my internet has crashed a couple times this evening.
No worries, we're just transitioning meetings, so your timing is good. So, colleagues, we are now about to go into our first zoning bylaw amendment, and I'm just pulling up the appropriate public meeting notification. As applicants may not know, but council well knows, we have to move into a public meeting to consider zoning bylaw amendments. So I'm going to tackle the first one, which is in regards to 3045 County Road 20. Ms. Martin, do I have that right? That's the first property we're considering this evening?
That is correct, Your Worship.
So council will now hold a public meeting to consider an application of the lands located at part of lot 30, concession 9, part 1 on plan 15R9984 from the rural zone to the rural special exception zone to facilitate the construction of an accessory structure as storage for a lighting business. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons wishing further notice of council's decision should share their name with our Deputy Director of Planning and Development, Krista Landstra. Are there people here for this public meeting? This is in regards to 3045 County Road 20.
Yes.
Great.
It's Bill
Welcome.
Makins. Hi.
Okay, good. Anyone else for this public meeting? I'm not
Yes,
seeing
Mike.
anyone. Okay, Martine St. Jean. Okay, welcome. Anyone else? Okay, then we'll move on. I'm going to pass this over to Deputy Director of Planning, Ms. Landstra, to give us the lowdown. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So through you to council, before you is zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA-02-22 for 3045 County Road 20. This is property owned by Makinson and Boutet. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are located on County Road 20, which is just east of the 416 and County Road 44. So the lands are within the rural designation and they're currently zoned rural within the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So the applicant has a lighting business and this business is more service focused. That includes contracted services that they perform on other properties and are not performed directly on the subject lands. However, the applicant would like to construct a storage building to store elements and supplies that they use for their lighting business. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the majority of the lands are wooded. There is an existing single detached dwelling, and that's located along the frontage of the property in alignment with where the civic numbering is showing on that aerial mapping image. So the applicants have proposed a new structure to support the commercial business, and this would be located where the property begins to flag out, which is in line with kind of the back of properties or the back property line for neighboring 3075 and 3035 in that general area. Next slide, please. So this shows a concept sketch of where the applicant is proposing the structure related to the commercial use. So the development includes a stone pad, and this stone pad would have a 40 by 40 feet structure for storage for the lighting business. The drawing also includes a proposed personal garage that they would include on this stone pad. And yeah, keep in mind this drawing is not to scale. And they have submitted a site plan control application, which would look at more specifics related to the layout of the proposed use. Next slide, please. So as stated, the landowner has proposed a commercial use to support a lighting business they own. So the property that we're looking at here is about 4 hectares. It's 10 acres in size. So the provincial policy statement and the county official plan do permit economic opportunities where the rural character is maintained and the use can be sustained by the rural service levels. The North Grenville official plan does permit small scale commercial uses within the rural designation, provided that they're compatible with the surrounding land uses and that we're able to control specific site programming, such as any parking and related traffic, ensuring that the property is screened and buffered, that there's any outdoor elements that they're controlled, and that the use is placed in a separate zone category where site plan control would apply. So as outlined in the report, the use can conform to the official plan elements that are outlined for commercial uses, and the applicant has submitted a site plan control application, as we mentioned, that will ensure all of the elements speaking directly to site programming will be addressed. Next slide, please. So the site-specific zoning includes a permission for storage for a lighting business as a permitted use for the subject lands. So the zone also clearly outlines that site plan control applies to the subject lands to address the commercial elements on the property that are being proposed. So the applicant has submitted this application at the same time as the zoning bylaw amendment, and they have been agreeable to move forward with the zoning bylaw amendment process, which allows us to use the comments that we received through this process to inform elements that they require for their site plan control application. So some of these comments relate to South Nation Conservation, which provided comments to us following the staff report that was completed. So the Conservation Authority outlined or identified that there is unevaluated wetlands and woodlands on the property, and they had requested that further review occur on these features to determine the significance. So based on the initial proposed location of the structure and the scale of the development, however, staff support that the zoning bylaw amendment be approved with any further work with respect to the natural heritage features occurring at the site plan application stage. So this recommendation is informed by the fact that the exact locations of proposed structures are not always known at the zoning bylaw amendment stage. And there is still an ability for the applicant to adjust their proposal prior to site plan. And they have already been in contact with South Nation Conservation to determine next steps in determining any existing wetland boundaries and determining whether they're able to adjust their proposal to stay away from the environmental features on the subject lands. So should that not be possible, the review recommended by South Nation Conservation will occur through the Planning Act application for the site plan control application. Next slide, please. So with that being said, staff recommend council approve and enact the bylaw to approve the zoning bylaw amendment for 3045 County Road 20 to allow storage for a lighting business on the subject lands. I will note that staff did receive public comment today from Mr. Fortier, who is in attendance at today's meeting. And the comments were generally focused around elements that are reviewed and controlled through site plan control for the property. So there was a concern about increase of noise for the activities that are being proposed, and that there the new use being proposed will further diminish their ability to enjoy their neighboring property, and concerns related to changes to the use in the future, should that occur. And I would just like to point out from a planning perspective that those issues are able to be addressed for the most part through site plan control. Site plan control does have an element that is registered with the property that does apply to any uses, and any changes that occur on the subject lands would trigger an amendment to that plan. So we would have an opportunity to comment on any future uses should they be proposed for the subject lands. And that is all that we've prepared for this presentation. So I will hand it back, and I am available for any questions.
And now that we've heard from the staff report, the applicant has an opportunity to weigh in should they wish. And then we would invite members of the public to also state any concerns should they have them. So is it Mr. Mackison? Is he with us this evening? Okay. Mr. Mackison, do you have anything you'd like to add before we hear from other members of the public, if there are any? No, you're good. Okay. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Fortier is here this evening. Is that right?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. So Mr. Fortier, is there anything you'd like to add as we are in the public meeting portion of our deliberations?
It's been several days now since we were out of country when we were advised of this. We were notified by our neighbors, all of whom have properties that basically abut onto this location. And there was a lot of concern raised by all the neighbors. I don't think any of them are here tonight. However, the main concern was the exact location of the structure. And I see that it's not really determined exactly where it will go. From what I understand from the clips that went through fairly fast, and a hand drawing that was submitted. Obviously our concern, we moved here from the city for the tranquility and the beauty of the lot and fell in love with the back forest. And now, ever since the property was sold, the noise has increased tremendously. So we're very concerned about more noise and more structures being put up there, potentially lighting. I have no idea what the future plans are, but the corner of the property that abuts all of the residences, or not all, but 2 residences on Brookberry Crescent, is really the major area of concern, because we can actually see that area from our backyards. And if we can see it, obviously we can hear the noise from construction and chainsaws and everything else that's been going on there. So that's basically our concern is we fear that we will not be able to continue enjoying our properties like we did when we first bought. I don't know if there's a way of finding out where the structure is going, or if it's possible to build it at the furthest point away from the Brookberry yards, if council decides to approve this amendment.
So why don't we actually ask Ms. Lanstra if she has more information on the location? I understand it's a fairly large property and it's a fairly wooded property. So I think certainly my impression, Ms. Lanstra, from what you were presenting is that there were some natural buffers given where the shed was to be located. Also given the description of the use as a storage facility, more or less, if I have that right. I think our assumption, Mr. Fortier, or certainly my assumption would be that a lot of noise wouldn't necessarily be generated. So Ms. Lanstra, maybe you could speak to those items, and I would also invite the applicant, Mr. Mackinson, to speak perhaps after you've had that opportunity, Ms. Lanstra.
Sure. So through you, Madam Mayor, to council. So the location that is proposed is the preferred and desired location that the applicant would like to see the use be located. And from a planning perspective, in terms of buffering and screening, being set back from having any kind of impact to the street facing portion of the property, the location is ideal from our perspective. What we are working with from this perspective are the natural heritage features that are located on the property, and they are located on the larger portion that is tucked in behind all of the neighboring landowners. There is a boundary of that feature in that general area, however, and that is kind of where the balance is right now in terms of trying to find and pin down that specific location. So the general location of where that use would be located is in the area that is shown and described, but there will need to be some adjustments potentially, depending on what we find through site plan control in terms of the natural heritage features on the property. And that's fairly typical when you're moving from a zoning bylaw amendment application to a more specific detail on a site plan type application. In terms of what we described for the use is, as we described, it's not one of a commercial use that is attracting the public onto the subject lands. It is being used for storage of supplies that would be picked up and used on other properties in the actual work. So in terms of an actual impact, we aren't anticipating that there would be anything major related to the commercial use. It would just be storage for dropping off and picking up in that location.
Okay, so I'm going to invite Mr. Mackison to speak. This is the public portion of the meeting, and then I'll go to Councillor Sullivan, who has her hand up. Mr. Mackison, and I'm sorry, is that how I pronounce your name? I apologize.
Yes.
Okay,
Higginson,
go
yes.
ahead.
As far as noise goes, like, it's just going to be used for storage. We don't have customers coming there. We're a service industry. Everything's done by email now and that. And it's the ideal place to put it. Where we're putting it, we're 30 feet, more than 30 feet away from the lot line. And between us, there's a forest. That 30 feet is all treed area. So in the summertime, you can't even see it. So you only see it in the wintertime. And it's gonna have siding on it. It's gonna look, it's gonna look decent. It's gonna look like it should. And there's not gonna be any more noise. All the chainsaws that the gentleman is referring to is from when we were cutting down the trees to put the pad in. Like that stuff's done. So you gotta say a few days to put the concrete in and a week to build the building, and that's about it for noise.
Okay.
Other than that, any questions, I'm more than willing to answer.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go to Councillor O'Sullivan and Councillor Barkley to ask questions. Mr. Fortier, if you want to make additional comment, you're certainly welcome. So just either turn on your screen or put up your hand or jump in, but I'll go to Councillor O'Sullivan and Councillor Barkley next. Go ahead, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Ms. Lanstra. So isn't there to be a landscape buffer between a commercial building and a residential lot? So that's one question. And if I just wanted to clarify in my mind where Mr. Fortier, is that the name? Where he lives. If you go back to the slide you had that showed all the properties around it, around the subject property, are these lots on the right-hand side? Yes, that one, I think.
So maybe Ms. Martin, before we go to Mr. Fortier, you can clarify for us?
Okay. So I think there's one kind of number 112. Is that the area where he's speaking of, Burberry Crescent or whatever? Is that the property?
I can maybe assist here, Councillor O'Sullivan. 112 is not my lot, but
okay,
there are numerous lots, the one beside it, and there's several others where when we are in our backyard, we can actually see the corner of that blue defined property. So when people are back there on ATVs, et cetera, cutting down trees, we can actually see them even in the summer. And of course, the noise, there's no noise back there. So anything, person talking, you can hear from our backyards, and we spend a lot of money on our yards to enjoy that. So that's why we're concerned, is that if this is going to be close to the properties 112 and further north, these are all properties that back onto that specific area. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Can I just ask Ms. Martin to jump in as well? Ms. Martin, is there anything else you want to add in terms of location, proximity?
So thank you, Your Worship. So the Deputy Director has been involved in this file and is more aware as to the general placement of the proposed structure. In regards to matters of noise, we do have a noise bylaw that regulates noise in regards to some of the activities that Mr. Fortier has raised, and that might be the more appropriate mechanism to address those concerns. But as the Deputy Director has mentioned, we are requiring site plan control to help address some of these concerns. And should the siting and the view towards that building be largely in the open, we could look at asking for some vegetative planting as a means and a mechanism of just providing more of that visual buffer.
Okay. So what about?
Go ahead, Councillor Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. What about lighting? Is there a lot of proposed outside lighting around the building?
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
there's not.
No. And so what about landscaping buffer? I think that would be appropriate to have landscaping buffer between commercial buildings and the residential lots that back there. Now, this property is approximately 10 acres that you have, right? Is that correct? And
yes.
that's the area that you want to put the building in, which is sort of straight back back behind the existing dwelling.
Correct. We really can't put it anywhere else because we're starting to get into the wetlands.
The wetlands. Okay, I understand that. Thank you. So I think
Ms. Landstra, did you want to add anything?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor O'Sullivan, I just wanted to speak to the landscape buffer element that you're referring to. We do require buffers between commercial and residential uses. When we do have existing vegetative buffer, that is often adequate, and it's often much more preferred to have something of this nature, wooded area that we can work with. Where we are limited in that, we can, as Director Martin outlined, supplement so that we could increase it. That is afforded to us through the site plan control application.
Thank you.
Which has not come yet, right? Okay.
Could you comment, Ms. Landstra, when does the site plan control kick in?
Through you to Councillor O'Sullivan, it would be like currently right now, as soon as we have that site-specific zoning come onto the property, the site plan control bylaw is in effect for that property. So the applicant has already submitted that application. They are already waiting on comments for that, and we're using the comments that we've received through the zoning bylaw amendment process to inform all the elements that we need to address all of these concerns that have been raised.
Okay, great. I'm going to go to Councillor Barkley now. Councillor Barkley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Ms. Landstra. Regarding the site plan control or the site plan application that's been submitted, I'm just reading in your report that based on the concept plan submitted, the structure is outside of the unevaluated wetland. And then it says further review of the wetland may be required. Has that been determined whether evaluation of the wetland is required or not at this point, or is that yet to be determined?
Correct. So through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Barkley, we From our preliminary review that we have completed, it does look as though the location that they've selected for the structures is outside of those unevaluated wetlands. And that's why staff feel comfortable recommending that the zoning portion of the application be approved, because we do have the site plan control application that can look more specifically at the locations should we need to adjust anything in terms of location. So if they were to go out on the property and look at the location, we're able to work with the Conservation Authority to determine where a boundary of that wetland is and set back from that feature so that there's no development occurring in the feature. Depending on what they see on the property, because it is difficult to see wetlands currently, once they get out there and take a look at it, any adjustments that need to occur can occur through the site plan control application.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about timing. From the applicant, I understand that trees are being cleared and he's about to pour a pad. So, and it's still, there's a lot of snow on the ground. And as you said, it's hard to see the wetland. It states in your report, further review of the wetland may be required. I'm just wondering.
Right, so
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, so staff reviewed through our mapping, and based off of the information we have, it appears as though they're outside of the wetland. So the location that they're selecting, our first instinct is that they are not in that feature. We did receive comments from the Conservation Authority that provided a broad overview of the property to say there are unevaluated wetlands on the property. And so we're including the caveat that we would be willing to look with the applicant at where those features may be once we get to the point of needing that step in the site plan control application. So from our initial review, it does appear as though they're outside of that wetland feature.
And so the site plan control will also what's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, it'll deal with the grading and drainage on the property, right? It will.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, council colleagues, anything else? Ms. Lancer, my only question is, given, it sounds like a location for the shed is well in hand, given what's been presented this evening. We understand and have made accommodations for other, business enterprises, if you will, however modest, in rural parts of the municipality. So my understanding is that you're in part recommending, because it's a larger property and the intended use of a shed is compatible in the area. Not to diminish Mr. Fortier's concerns in any way, shape, or form, but the reality is in rural parts of North Granville, we do accommodate smaller scale business enterprises. And I know in this case, all we're looking at is a shed. So I know sometimes one of the questions we receive is, will it go beyond a shed? So the zoning bylaw amendment in this case allows for what? Should the amendment pass? Can it go further than a shed? Mr. Mackiston has indicated his business is largely off-site. This is intended to be a storage facility. Can you just speak to what the zoning bylaw ultimately allows? And perhaps that could be helpful to Mr. Fortier as well.
Sure. So through you to the to council, the bylaw does permit specifically in the site specific amendment a accessory structure that permits storage for a lighting business. So further, that use is then controlled through the site plan control bylaw. So if there are any amendments that occur, it would trigger a review through the site plan control bylaw.
Okay, and there's no automatic assumption that any other business related activities would be approved. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's certainly helpful to me. I would like to suggest that we still are in the public meeting. So Mr. Fortier, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say before I close the meeting, in which case, council will consider the motion.
Can I just find out what the size is of this structure? I don't
Absolutely.
think I see it anywhere in the documents.
Sure, not a problem. Ms. Lancer or
Sure.
Ms. Lancer, go ahead.
So through you to Mr. Fortier, the structure is 40 feet by 40 feet. So 1,600 square feet in size, I believe, if that math is correct.
Mr. Mackison, could you just speak to what you think the activity will be in terms of use of the shed? Obviously, product will be stored in the shed. How do you foresee sort of activity on weekends, evenings, throughout the day? It might be helpful for us to have a better sense of that.
The only activity on the nights and weekends is just family.
Okay.
The shop will just be storage, you know?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilor O'Sullivan? I'm sorry, Councilor O'Sullivan, you are muted.
Sorry. So through you, Madam Mayor. So there are two buildings. They're both 40 feet by 40 feet. One of them is the storage shed for the lighting equipment. And the second one is a garage for personal use. And for vehicles, working on his own utilities and our own vehicle and toys. So is there a difference in the impact that it would have on the neighboring neighbors if they were reversed? If the personal garage was on the right and the storage commercial space was on the left, if 1 and 2 were reversed, is that going to make any difference for the impact on the Mr. Fortier neighbors?
So maybe
there are going to be two buildings, right? 1,600 square feet each.
Perhaps Mr. Fortier, sorry, Mr. Mackison, do you wish to clarify?
It wouldn't matter to me which unit was used for whatever purpose. The second building is going to be 2-3 years down the road. It's not going to be built right away.
So the second one is your personal garage for your own personal use.
Correct. To put, you want to do an oil change, you want to park your sleds, your snowmobiles in the summertime out of the sun, that kind of stuff. Work on the kids' toys, because there is no garage on the property now to do that kind of stuff.
Okay, understood. Okay, thank you. And so in terms of lighting or noise or anything, it's really not going to matter. So probably having the storage shed on the right-hand side closer to those residential properties is probably better than having your garage.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that worked for me.
And that's what I understand on this drawing here, that the building number 1 on the right will be the storage shed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Do you have further comment on that?
I'm sorry, did you say my name?
Mr. Fortier,
Yeah. Sorry, you
why
cut
don't you
out.
go ahead, and then I'll ask Ms. Lancer to comment.
Okay, no, sorry, I wasn't aware that there was 2 structures coming. I thought there was only one. And they're referred to as sheds, just so you know, the entire size of our residence is 1,600 square feet. So it is the size of a house and not a shed, just for your information, but I wasn't aware of the second structure.
Ms. Lancer, can you clarify, please, what we're being asked to authorize this evening?
Sure. So through Madam Mayor to Council, the commercial structure that's being proposed is the structure that is currently not permitted within the zoning bylaw. The personal shed or personal garage, that is a permitted use and would currently be permitted under our zoning bylaw. So there is no requirement from council to approve that structure. The applicant has been working for site plan control because those buildings are so close to each other. We have been working on elements that would control some of these elements that we speak of for both of the buildings, which should help in terms of any impacts, or at least reviewing so that we can mitigate anything that has come up in this meeting. I made a note here in terms of the location of the structure that I can discuss with Mr. Makinson after the meeting in terms of what will be proposed in the site plan control application.
Okay. Anything else, council colleagues? Mr. Fortier, just and Mr. Maxon, anything else you'd like to say before I close the public meeting?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fortier, anything?
No, Your
else?
Worship.
Okay, and I accept your point. The characterization of a shed may, in fact, not accurately reflect the scope of what is to be stored. But Ms. Lancer, perhaps I take some comfort in what we're approving tonight in terms of the specificity. That being said, I'll save any other comments for the first after the close of the public meeting. And at this stage, I'm just going to canvass my screen. I see no one else here tonight. I just want to confirm to participate in the public meeting.
We do have one comment, Your Worship, in the chat section that says, what about shipping and receiving trucks? And that's from Matt Wetzel. I'm assuming that that's with respect to this matter.
Okay, so Ms. Lanstra, perhaps we can go to you first on that one.
Sure. So through Madam Mayor to Council, from the characterization of the commercial use that's occurring, I'm not aware that there will be any large amount of traffic that's going back to the property. From what Mr. Makinson has described to me, they're storing their lights in Rubbermaid bins, and they'll be taking those to and from the property so that they can install the lights on other properties. We will be looking at that access back to the structure and that stone pad for vehicle access back to that. So there will be review from that sense. But in terms of what the use is and the scale of it, there's no concerns from myself in terms of what will be occurring for that small scale commercial use.
Okay. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Babcock-Cormier, from members of the public?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. So I'm going to move to close the public meeting at 8:14 p.m. Thank you. And I would ask, maybe Ms. Lanstra, you have the recommendation before you. It would be most helpful if you were able to read it. Or maybe Ms. Babcock-Cormier, you might have it. Okay,
Certainly.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. That Council approve and enact bylaw 20-22 to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 50-12 to amend the lands legally described as part of lot 30 concession 9 part 1 on plan 15R 984 from rural zone to the rural special exception zone to facilitate the construction of an accessory structure as storage for a lighting business.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Councilor Strachan, Councilor Barkley, thank you. Okay. Any comments from council? Seeing none. Ms. Lancer, how will you be involved in the site plan control process?
So the application has been submitted to our office and it already is with me. So we have been working with different departments and the Conservation Authority to exchange information so that we can help Mr. Makinson have a complete application of information required to review. A large purpose of this meeting was to inform that. So we'll be working following this meeting in terms of putting everything together so that it can then be circulated to our departments. We'll work to put that together and then it will be brought forward to council for consideration.
Okay. So we have a mover and a seconder. Any last comments from colleagues? Not seeing any. Okay. I want to thank obviously Mr. Mackinson for being here, but I also want to thank Mr. Fortier for bringing forward the concerns from residents. It's always helpful to better understand where neighboring properties may have anxieties or fears. And I think I'm hopeful that the site plan control process helps to ameliorate some of those. The reality is in North Grenville, given the the highly rural nature of our community as much as it is urban. Accommodation for some of these smaller scale commercial uses is something that is fairly standard within the municipality. So I'll call the vote on this question and thank staff and the applicant and Mr. Fortier for being here this evening and presenting various perspectives. All in favor, please? Good. Any opposition? Seeing none. That carries, and I thank everyone for their contribution to this file. Thank you, Mr. Mackison.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take good care. Thank you, Mr. Fortier, as well. Okay, colleagues, it's 8:20. We've been, as you know, meeting for nearly 3 hours. I'm going to advise just a very quick 5-minute break, grab a glass of water. We do have another fairly substantial zoning bylaw amendment to consider, if not two, or no, we have at least one remaining. And as a consequence, I think it's important that we just refresh briefly. I'm going to be asking everyone to mute, stop video, and to please come back online in 5 minutes. Thank you. I don't know. Okay, if I could ask council colleagues to put on their screens, please. We'll get back to business. Thank you. Just waiting for Councillor O'Sullivan, Councillor Barkley.
I am here. I can't get my video to start.
Okay. I think what we'll do is, I'm sure you'll come on shortly. Sometimes it takes a second. I'm going to proceed to read the public meeting procedure for the application on 1365 Beulah Road. And Ms. Martin, I believe that's the application we're dealing with now. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Worship, and Deputy Director Landstra will be handling this file.
Okay, so council will now hold a public meeting to consider an application of the lands located at part of lot 13, concession 9 Oxford, being part 1 on plan 15R 12068, and part of lot 13, concession 9 Oxford, as in PR 100-614, except part 1, 2, 15R 7580, part 1, 157761 and traveled road from tourist commercial special exception to rural special exception and rural special exception holding zone in order to permit limited uses on the property. I must advise that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider any objections. Any persons who wish further notice should reach out to Deputy Director Planning, Crystal Landstra. I'm looking to see if there's anyone here for the public meeting this evening. Can you please identify yourself? So I have a Mr. Whitehead, thank you.
I'm sorry, yes, I'm also here for that meeting.
And Mr. Schmitz, are you representing the applicant or are you here to speak as concerned residents?
Concerned residents.
Your resident, Mr. Schmitz. Mr. Whitehead?
Your Worship, I'm the applicant.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Kenny, you're representing the applicant, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to identify themselves? Mr. Whitehead, go ahead.
If I may, Your Worship, we also have Bernie Muncaster in attendance.
Okay. Oh, I see Mr. Muncaster. Thank you. Good. All right.
Yeah, I know, Joe.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to identify themselves? Is there a Mr. or Ms. Schmitz?
Yes, please.
Yes, we're
here.
both here.
Okay, and you're representing the applicant or are you concerned residents?
Concerned residents.
I'm concerned.
So what we're going to do in terms of process is we're going to hear the report from Ms. Landstra. Then we invite the applicant and or his representatives to make any comments, and then we invite members of the public. So we'll go in that order, and I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Landstra to present the staff report. Thank you, Ms. Landstra.
Perfect, thank you. So through you, Madam Mayor, to council and the public, before you is zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA-19-21 for 1365 Beulah Road. As the applicant has requested to remove a tourist commercial use on the property that permits a golf course that is not constructed, and they would like to place a special rural zone that would permit an agricultural use for crop farming on the subject lands. So they have proposed that rural residential uses and any construction of buildings and structures would be prohibited on the lands. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are located on Beulah Road to the west of Limerick Road. The majority of the uses are rural, with rural residential lots clustered along Beulah Road, as you can see at the bottom of that image. The applicant owns adjacent lands that they also currently farms, which you can see over for lot 12, concession 9 on the site location map. So the applicant purchased the property that we are reviewing currently in around with the blue outline in spring of 2019 and has been using the property for agricultural cash crop purposes. However, the property is not currently zoned for that use. Agricultural uses are not permitted within the current bylaw uses for the property. The municipality notified the landowner in summer of 2019, and an application for zoning bylaw amendment was submitted and received by the municipality in October of 2021. Next slide, please. So as you can see from aerial imagery, the subject lands have undergone substantial site alteration from approximately 2018 or early 2019 until present. All woodlands have been cleared from the subject lands, and as well, much of the soils have been regraded and a portion has been allowed for crop farming. Next slide, please. So the subject lands, the official plan flags the subject lands for almost the entirety as unevaluated wetlands and woodlands. Through the review of the file, the municipality did receive comments from Rideau Valley Conservation Authority that provided and outlined that due to the substantial site alteration that has occurred, they were unable to provide any comments on whether the lands met the official plan policies, and they were unsure how the applicant could meet the policies and gain support for this application. Following receipt of those comments, staff worked with the applicant's consultants to determine which official plan policies would be in effect based on the conditions, site conditions for the subject lands. So as there is no site alteration bylaw for the municipality, there is no way to guarantee and stop site alteration to occur prior to development applications. So the consultants attended the site and they provided a conditions brief with a registered professional planning opinion on what policies would apply. Next slide, please. So this slide gives an overview of the file with respect to site conditions and previous uses, which I've already touched upon in the slides previous. So next slide, please. So the conditions brief confirmed the presence of hazardous soils, and it agreed that due to the exclusion of buildings and structures from the zoning, the natural hazard policies are satisfied. The brief confirmed that there are no longer any woodlands located on the subject lands, and therefore the woodland policies are not applicable for this application. The condition brief did confirm that a portion of where the unevaluated wetlands mapping was located had been tile drained for agricultural use. These lands no longer exhibited wetland characteristics. However, the remainder of the lands to the north where there is no tiling is still likely to be assessed as wetland, and the area is, significantly disturbed. As such, the unevaluated wetland policies would apply for the areas that are still exhibiting wetland characteristics and would likely be assessed as wetland. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to provide an outline of the official plan policy. So the official plan policy states that development in an area where the wetland has not been evaluated as provincially significant or locally significant. In this area, council may require an evaluation of the wetland and or an environmental impact study. And it is important to note that for our purposes, the OP policies that surround the contents of an EIS or environmental impact study, they do also include the evaluation of significance for natural heritage features. So the applicant's ecologist has provided an opinion that the wetland has limited value on the subject lands. Staff note, however, that there was no formal evaluation of the wetland that took place, and therefore there is no confirmation of significance of the feature. And from staff perspective, this makes it difficult to confirm the claim that there is limited value to the wetland. So the feature is located in close proximity to provincially significant wetlands. There were wetland species identified, and there is knowledge of abundance of water in the area and surrounding area. Staff recommend that the feature be evaluated for significance to be determined prior to affirming the opinion of whether the feature is limited in value. Next slide, please. So based on that analysis, staff generally do support the proposal to permit agricultural cash cropping at 1365 Beulah Road. Staff recommend that the portion of the property that has been tile drained in 2020 be rezoned to allow the agricultural use. And on the map on the slide, this is the area that's shown in the red hatching. New information for additional tile drainage on the subject lands was provided earlier today, and I'll speak a bit more in detail on the next slide. But for the lands that are identified, oh, thanks. So for the lands that are identified on the schedule before you that are in the blue hatching, staff do recommend that a formal wetland evaluation be undertaken on the remainder of the lands that exhibit the wetland characteristics to determine whether removal of the feature from the subject lands will have any impact. So staff do acknowledge that the feature has experienced significant disturbance and its function may have been reduced and isolated. However, there is still significant water on the subject lands, and along with other important considerations such as wetland vegetation present and proximity to other provincially significant wetlands, staff recommend the significance of this feature be evaluated prior to further development. Next slide, please. So staff understand that the new information was provided today. It is proposing that there's an increase in the rural 63 zone for that special zone. In order to make the change, we understand that there will be a request to defer the decision on this application. Staff are supportive of this request. Staff will continue to recommend, however, that a wetland evaluation to determine significance be included as a requirement for the removal of the holding symbol. Next slide, please. So I'm available to answer any questions, and I understand the agent is available and will be completing a presentation. So I'm available for any questions related to that as well. Thank you.
Sorry, so just procedurally, I see Councillor Barkley's hand. So we'll go to questions with staff based upon what Ms. Landstra has presented. And is it my understanding that Mr. Whitehead is making a presentation on behalf of the applicant? Is that correct? Okay.
That's
so first
correct,
of all, okay, thank you. First of all, though, we will give council the opportunity to ask questions of Ms. Landstra. Is there any council wishing to do that before the presentation by Mr. Whitehead? I just have a quick question about the history of this property. Obviously, we've heard for some time from residents who are concerned about the removal of almost all trees from this land, that it had been done preemptively in advance of the consideration of rezoning that is before us this evening. So I'm trying to understand when we say there's no implications on our natural heritage or wooded lot policies. It all seems a bit moot, which I find hard to manage in the face of a positive recommendation. So Ms. Landstra, can you just help me reconcile the land obviously was of a very different nature prior to being cleared and used for agricultural cash cropping. Are we able to give no consideration to the previous usage or non-usage of that land?
Sure. So through Madam Mayor to Council, in terms of the policies that are applicable at the time of submission of the application, that's what we are to look at in terms of what applies to this property. So typically that is why many municipalities rely on site alteration bylaws, which help you maintain what that pre-development surface cover is. Without that bylaw, that is difficult to do. And you see that all across the province in areas that sometimes people try to jump the gun to start clearing. From my understanding, there was clearing that occurred even prior to the sale of this property, which would have been permissible because there is no bylaw that controls that. So there has been some clearing prior to the sale and some clearing by the current landowner that has resulted in the conditions that were present at the time of the application submitted. So staff have worked with the consultant and they've been really great at providing site condition information so that we could assess what policies actually could apply and what we could hang our hats on in terms of reviewing the property. And that's what is before you today.
Thank you. And I will go to Councillor Barkley and Councillor Struckian shortly, but I just want to express my appreciation for that information. Of course, council over a year ago had made that request for a site alteration bylaw to come forward so that we could better deal with future uses in a more concerted and planned way. And to that end, I understand that one will be coming forward in a matter of weeks for our consideration. And I think tonight's discussion likely highlights the value of that. That being said, I'll go to Councillor Barclay and then Councillor Strahan. And of course, Mr. Whitehead, you absolutely will get your opportunity to present as soon as we finish this round of questions. Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me, through you to Ms. Langstra. I'm struggling a bit with the language, and I think I'd like some clarification. When we say that the property was not recognized as having agricultural use, is that not a way of saying agricultural use is not permitted? I mean, but it is being used for agricultural use. Is that my understanding, that agricultural use is taking place?
Ms. Lanstra?
Sure. So through the mayor to Councillor Barclay, the current comprehensive zoning bylaw does not include agricultural uses for this property. It is our understanding that there was agricultural uses that began, and that's how the municipality became aware of this situation and requested an application, or the uses ceased to continue, and an application to consider an amendment to include agricultural uses on this property.
And in 2019, when the property was purchased, it was zoned. It was not zoned for agricultural use when it was purchased. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, it was zoned for a tourist commercial golf course use.
Okay. The other question, if I might, Madam Mayor,
yes,
regards to the discussion about significant wetlands. I believe I'm of the opinion that wetlands play an important role in stormwater management and source water protection or regeneration, aquifer regeneration. Are there not significant wetlands just adjacent to this property?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
There's both to the east and to the west of the property are provincially significant wetlands.
So I understand that you're not necessarily an expert in drainage, but when you tile drain part of that property that is close to significant wetlands, we've got runoff, and if it's being used for agricultural use, we have the possibility of chemical fertilizer being drained into those wetlands. Is that not correct?
You are correct that I am not an expert in this. I do understand the logic that you're following does make sense to me, and I would assume that whatever those tiles are catching on that land, they are directing it to an outlet further down the property that does feed into those wetland features that are surrounding the property.
Okay. Well, I'd be in support of an environmental impact study and or an evaluation of the significance of what's happening on that property and plan to happen. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Strahan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to the Deputy Director. So I fully agree, and I'm supportive of protecting wetlands for a variety of different reasons. I guess I have a question though regarding the current zoning. So there are provincially significant wetlands adjacent, but this property is currently zoned for a golf course use. And there was no evaluation done of the wetlands prior to that zoning?
So through Madam Mayor to Councillor Strahan, that zoning was in place in the 1990s. So when it went into place, there was not the same policy regime that we currently have. So in terms of what assessment would have occurred for that type of application, it was much easier to get different uses at that time than it currently is.
Okay, understood. But the current zoning still applies, even though it was done decades ago, correct? That evaluation would have still been relevant. And I guess what I'm leading to is it's a bit of a a bit confusing for me to say that we have a zoning for a golf course, which they're not exactly environmentally friendly to begin with. So I think they would be in contradiction with a wetland and would also require clearing for that to be allowed. If you were planning a golf course and it's within the current zoning allowance and you would be allowed to clear, is that a site alteration that would have required a different level of approval, even though it was within the zoning? If you said, I want to go ahead with a golf course, notwithstanding that a different use was actually took place, but I think that the end result would have been the same, and that would have been removing those trees and so on. So I'm just trying to unpack a bit of what the current zoning is and what actually happened.
Right. So the current zoning, when it would have come into effect, there wouldn't have been the same review. So an environment or wetland evaluation would not necessarily have been a requirement for them to get that zoning. For them to develop the use, yes, there may have been additional approvals that could have triggered wetland evaluation. The tricky part with this file is that we're dealing with a use that occurred that wasn't following the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So what we're trying to do is play a bit of catch up here and review what we are able to on the subject lands. The area that we're proposing that they continue the agricultural use is areas that they have tile drained those lands, and it would be very difficult for there to be anything else on those lands.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate that the use wasn't in line with what the current zoning is. I'm just, I guess, just looking at this at face value to say that if you're planning a golf course, you get rid of the trees and you don't actually care about wetlands. Ultimately, I don't know too many golf courses that actually have wetlands as part of their water features, but you know, I think that you know, that zoning and removing the trees and the agricultural piece and removing the trees, I think would have resulted in the same piece. But perhaps you know, perhaps maybe there would have been something triggered in there when they said golf course that it would have required that review automatically to take place. I don't know. I'm not convinced that that is actually the case, but I appreciate the division of the property at this stage and being able to say, okay, this is probably not the way it should have gone. And if it was today, it wouldn't have gone this way, and that zoning wouldn't have applied without the environmental impact assessment and the wetland evaluation and so on. So thank you very much.
Ms. Lanstra, if I can just clarify though, many additional acres of land were cleared with the existing owner now, right? So as a portion of the land was cleared preemptively for a golf course that never happened, and then many additional acres were cleared in anticipation of agricultural uses that are now at play to some extent, correct?
So yes, there was clearing that occurred by the current owner as well as previous. I'm not entirely sure whether that is connected to the historic golf course use. That looks like it was a use that was approved decades ago, and we don't know much more about it other than that. So it could just be a use that has historically existed in those zoning provisions and not much else.
Okay. Okay. Anything else for Ms. Lanstra before we go to Mr. Whitehead? Not seeing anything. Okay. And I just want to be clear, the reason this property is known to me is because, in fact, we have heard from many residents in the area who had expressed concern when additional changes took place to the property. So that's obviously the context I bring. So I welcome the opportunity to hear from Mr. Whitehead on the applicant's desire for use of this land at this time. So Mr. Whitehead, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just by way of introduction, my name is Brian Whitehead. I'm a registered professional planner with JP2G Consultants, and I'm joined tonight by Brianna Kenny, who's a qualified biologist with JP2G since 2013, and Bernie Muncaster, who's also more well-known in your parts as a biologist. And Brianna has been working with Bernie since she's worked with us, starting in a mentorship role, but as a lone biologist in our firm, it's good to have an internal peer review and person like Bernie with lots of experience to draw on for situations like this. I've been, Mr. Scouten has been a client of mine since 2017, mostly in Renfrew County, doing some projects near the town of Renfrew. When he was issued an order, he was issued a compliance order from the planning department to file this application for zoning bylaw amendment. He approached me about it. And so that's the nature of this application. Presumably the application was initiated as a result of complaints from surrounding property owners. The zoning that's on the property, the golf course zoning, I would call it a legacy zoning. The golf course was never developed, and if it had been, there would have been site plan controls likely required, like he did with a previous application tonight. That application would have had to address the policies that are currently in place. And I think that issue here is the fact that the zoning bylaw is older than your official plan, and your official plan, I believe, is around 2018, fairly recent, and includes a lot of more current layers of information like woodland habitat and unevaluated wetlands. And in fact, the property is now designated mineral aggregate for bedrock, and agriculture is a permitted use within the aggregate designation, provided that there are no uses that would preclude, like buildings or structures, that would preclude the future extraction potential of the property. So I think that's a bit of the legacy, but the approach I've taken with this project, and like others in my experience, is that it's in the best interest of my client to work cooperatively with staff on coming up with solutions to deal with the issues. The issues are not easy, but we've done what we can to work closely with staff. And when they asked us for a planning justification report to support the application for zoning bylaw amendment, we complied with that. And when the application got rolling in December, when we first met Crystal on December, I guess it was 16th, it was requested that, and the weather was quite good in December, and it was requested that we send somebody out that we might be qualified to do some site reconnaissance, and that's how Brianna Kenny got involved. And Brianna went out on the 17th of December, the next day at my request, and did the site visit that forms the basis of the existing conditions report that is in your package today, and it's got photographs in there. And I'll be asking Brianna to make a few comments on that a little later. Where we sort of got a little, I'd say, sidetracked or caught a bit off guard was with last Thursday, when we didn't have a chance. We submitted the ecology opinion, my planning opinion, and in support of the rezoning. And we were advised by staff last Thursday that the proposal was going to be placed in a holding zone. She didn't have the report ready yet, so we couldn't see the full staff report until Monday. But the proposal was to place the lands that weren't tile drained within a holding symbol, with a requirement as a condition to removal of the holding that an evaluation in accordance with the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System, or OWS as it's called, be conducted as a condition to removal of the holding before any agricultural use. And after considering that approach, I'd like to let council know that we're not opposed to that recommendation for that approach. However, there's a couple of matters that have come up since, well, just this week, that have resulted in our request for council to defer a decision on this bylaw. And one of them is the fact that when we submitted some information with Brianna's report on the tile drainage, it was drawn from an existing database, and Brianna can explain what the database is. And the bylaw is based on that information. When I was updating Mr. Scouten on the status of the application, actually yesterday morning, he indicated to me that he did have additional, more accurate tile drainage information from a firm that he deals with on drainage. Trying to remember the name. Trimble Agriculture that does this drainage work, and we provided that information to staff, and it shows that considerably more lands have been tile drained than what we thought. So there is a request to defer it so that we can talk to staff about how that information can be incorporated into the bylaw. And the second element, and the reason why Bernie and Brianna are here tonight more so, is because of the holding provision and the request or the recommendation to conduct that OWES evaluation. So that's a little background, kind of lengthy, but I thought necessary. But maybe if we go to the next slide, I can just present the agenda. It's called agenda, but it's more or less just an outline of what we'd like to cover in this presentation. I'd like to cover the first few items, like the description, and present the additional information we have on the tile drainage, offer some comments or some clarifications on the existing zoning, and indicate how we would like to revise the map schedule on the proposed zoning. And then Brianna, I'd like to turn over to her for the next item on site conditions. And Bernie Muncaster will follow up at the end with some comments about the use of the OWES system. And our concern there is that from my planning, based on my conversations with the biologist, is that my understanding from reading the staff report is that there is staff is not convinced that there isn't a hydrologic connection between this property and the Limerick provincially significant wetland, which is on the opposite side of Limerick Road. And I guess there's another element of it. It's further away to the west. But just for clarification on that, the lands being rezoned are actually outside of the 120 meter influence area, but they're called adjacent lands. But at any rate, we're prepared to look at that and conduct an EIS, but we wanted to make sure that the approach that we use is going to address the concerns that the township have. And I'll let Bernie explain that a bit more. Maybe we just go to the next slide, please. So this is a slide you've seen already, I guess, in terms of the lands that are they're subject to the application. Just for clarity, it's about 93 acres of land. And actually it's formed in two parts. There's the first part, the golf course land component of it is 65 acres. And that was purchased by Mr. Scouten in 2019. And the land that was purchased was cleared by the previous owner. It wasn't cleared by Mr. Scouten. He bought it that way. But having said that, obviously Mr. Scouten is in agriculture. He's a farmer, and his intent was to develop this property for agricultural purposes. So there's no denying that. And the second parcel of land, and it'll be shown a little bit more clearly in another slide, was the subject of an application for lot addition. And it's up in the northeast corner, and it's 28 acres of land. And that land severance was applied for a couple of years ago by Mr. Scouten, and it had been also been cleared before it was purchased. It was consent was approved by the consent granting authority without the requirement for an EIS. That was reviewed by and it's zoned rural, and it's the conservation authority did not recommend an EIS, and the consent granting authority approved it on that basis. So needless to say, Mr. Scouten's a little confused about why it's now being required to do an EIS. But that aside, we're in support with doing more work on the property, subject to some discussions about the scope of work with staff. On this slide, you'll see additional lands owned by Mr. Scouten to the west. He owns 400 or 500 acres of additional lands to the west of this property that are zoned rural already, and agriculture is a permitted use in a rural zone. So even though the official plan does include an overlay that says unevaluated wetland, the zoning, the applicable zoning or the applicable law in this case is rural, and the agriculture is permitted. Next slide, please. This is the additional information that we submitted today, and it was provided, as I mentioned, by Trimble Agriculture, who does the tile drain work. It shows the existing tile drains on the left on the additional lands owned by Mr. Scouten, and also the tile drain that more recently installed. And I don't know exactly when this additional tile drain that was installed, but it does include about it would be at least 50 or 60 acres there. And it has also been extended up the entire length of the property. You can see 3 blue lines, which are tile drain lands that have been tile drained to dewater the property, such that additional tile drainage can be installed at a later date, is my understanding. Also, there's trenching that's been around the property, the perimeter of the property to drain it. And again, Brianna will be able to speak to that information. Next slide, please. Now, this is a map showing the existing zoning on the property. As you can see, the C7-2 zoning is the golf course zoning. And as I mentioned, it's about 65 acres of land. And it does not permit agriculture. It was a site-specific zoning that limits the permitted uses to uses that are a golf course and related uses. So what we've done with this slide is overlaying the tile drain information onto the lands that are shown on the zoning. And as you can see, probably at least over half of the existing C7-2 zone is occupied by a tile drain, existing tile drain. And then when you factor in the existing RU zone, which permits agriculture, of the 90 acres that's affected, 93 acres that's affected, it's about less than 1/3 of it that's actually zoned C7E2, that's outside of the existing tile drain. So, and it's actually less than 5% of the entire land holdings that Mr. Scouten owned. So, next slide, please.
Mr. Whitehead, I am conscious that there are also residents who are likely wanting to speak on record at the public meeting. So I know you have multiple speakers. Can you give us a sense of how long you plan to talk?
This is my last slide.
Perfect.
And then there's just 2 more slides after that.
Thank you. It's very informative. We just want to be respectful to everyone who's shown up tonight. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And so on this slide, we're showing the proposed zoning that's been recommended by staff. As at the bottom it says proposed RU-E-63, and what we're requesting is that the area in yellow be added to that RU-63 zone, and that the remaining areas shown with the hatch line, the additional lands and the existing drain, be the subject of the holding symbol. And then some discussions with staff additional about the scope of work that would be required to lift that holding zone. And let me think now. Yeah, and actually the reason for the exception on the zoning was a recommendation in our planning report because of the aggregate designation on the property. It was included our recommendation that no buildings or structures be put on the property that would preclude the potential use of aggregate in the long term. But that has also been helpful or supporting of this application from the environmental side, because one of the three criteria or concerns, environmental concerns, was that this property is identified on a map as having organic soils, which would be problematic for buildings, but not for agriculture. So it's served, the exception zone has served a dual purpose in this case. That's all I have to say from the planning. I'll refer it to Brianna for some brief comments on the existing conditions, followed by Bernie. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, if we could just skip to the next slide, please. So the site conditions, so as it was mentioned previously, I did go out on December 17th last year. There was no snow yet, so I was able to get a pretty good feel for the property. This air photo is from 2019, and as you can see, there's the kind of green overlay there. So the majority of the property is mapped as unevaluated wetland. And the PSW, the Limerick Indian Creek wetland, is approximately 130 meters to the east, and it kind of also does loop around. So it's about 600 meters to the southwest of the property as well. So during my site visit, so yeah, it was evident that the front portion of the property, the cornfield portion there, had been tile drained. The outlet for those tile drains is around where photo 1 had been taken, kind of in the southern corner of the property there. It outlets into a ditch along the driveway, and then the water gets carried down to the southwest. There has been ditches constructed along the edges of the property too. And yeah, so yeah, the cornfield portion has been tile drained. And then so as you move further north, the northern portion of the properties have been historically disturbed just to varying degrees. The first part is kind of a grass field area, just hadn't been planted in corn last year. As you move further north, there's kind of an area of young regenerating trees and stems there. Further north of that is more of a disturbed area where more recent disturbance has occurred, and there's kind of some muddy areas there with large piles of woody debris and that kind of thing that have been cleared. And then further north, hasn't been recently touched, I guess, but there was evidence of historical cutting in there as well. And there's, as a result, there's some taller regenerating trees and shrubs in that area. There were pockets of standing water noted on the property. And so whenever the vegetation reemerges in the spring, it's likely that some portions of the property would come up as wetland based on like a 50% vegetation rule. That being said, it's not anticipated that it is going to be assessed as a provincially significant wetland, just because of the existing conditions and the subject lands as they contain limited features and functions in their current state. And the wetland has been greatly impacted by historical and recent disturbances on and adjacent to the subject lands. So this has resulted in smaller, more isolated and highly disturbed wetlands that remain on the subject lands. And in turn, it's anticipated that they have limited value. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to Bernie.
Good evening. I'll just speak a couple of minutes here. I know it's getting late on the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. And so both Brianna and I have successfully completed the provincial system, and we're certified as wetland evaluators. So our recommendation is to do the wetland evaluation work in 2 steps. The first step, of course, is to apply what the manual requires to determine whether a wetland is provincially significant or not. And there are 4 components to that. There's a biological component, a social component, which deals with recreational, educational activities, any economic, such as trapping or timber activity. And then a hydrological component there looks at flood attenuation, looks at water quality benefits and groundwater recharge, those types of items. And lastly, there's a special features component. Species at risk is a big part of that, as well as things such as fish habitat, waterfowl nesting, rare wetland types. So we'll do the evaluation, going through that. And then but we also think it's important to have an impact assessment component of it, because first question, is it provincially significant or not? And then second question is, what impact on the adjacent wetlands is anticipated. So we'll do that as part of our field work and our report ready as well. I'm happy to provide any more information on the evaluation system if people have specific questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Council colleague, we are in, we are in a public meeting, and I am conscious that others are here. So any quick questions for the presenters before I invite members of the public to make comment? I'm looking specifically at council colleagues. Seeing none, I will now invite others who are here for the meeting to state any concerns they might have. Understand there were a couple of persons. Okay, we have Mr. I think Schmitz, unless you're using a different Zoom account, and you can identify yourself. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My name is Joe Schmitz, and I object to this zoning bylaw amendment. I own adjacent residential property of 1427 Limerick Road. My property and belongings have been damaged by Mr. Scoutton's illegal agriculture operations at 136 Beulah Road. I'd like to just make a correction for everyone here that land use for that property is also a park, not just a golf course, and that is listed in the zoning bylaws. There has been a lot of information provided so far, so with my report that I'm providing, or my presentation, I will shorten it down so he saves a little bit more time. My first request would be that we correct the letter from Mr. Brian Woodhead that states that Mr. Scoutton did not remove any of the forest that was there. I'd like that to be action point 1. As provided in the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, I requested the grading and drainage plan. No such plan has been presented for this amendment. As damages to adjacent residential properties are a direct result of illegal agriculture operations, and due to significant changes in grading, elevation, and drainage of the property, the members of this council will not have all the available information to make zoning bylaw amendment decisions that affect the health and safety of affected residents. These recent significant changes to this property by Mr. Scoutton have allowed agriculture pesticides and non-agriculture biosolids to flow freely on adjacent residential properties that have not previously been affected. For action point 2, I request that prior to any further consideration of this amendment, that the following studies / reports be submitted by the applicant of this amendment in accordance with the municipal zoning bylaw amendment application, to include the grading, slope, and drainage plan, a minimum distance separation based on slope, and the environmental impact study that was to have been completed prior to deforestation at this property. So in summary, a proper decision process requires complete, accurate, and relevant information and recommendations, especially when amending zoning bylaws that are to the detriment of municipal residents. Considering the issues of health and safety and lack of damage control to adjacent residential properties by Mr. Scoutton, these documents are essential information. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmitz. I'm going to look to others who may wish to go on record this evening. Is there anyone else? I'm not sure I see anyone. Ms. Babcock-Cormier, have you received any requests to speak?
No, I've not, Your Worship.
Okay. So we'll leave it there for now. And if there are other members of the public who wish to speak, they must do so before the end of the public meeting. So we are still in the public meeting portion, colleagues. Are there questions now for the presenter on behalf of the applicant or for Mr. Schmitz, who just also made some comments? I understand at this stage, we're really dealing with the prospect of a deferral. My question to Ms. Lanstra is, you're actually not suggesting that council consider the motion this evening. That's my understanding, Ms. Lanstra, and that more time be given so that you can consider new information from the applicant and or other considerations. Is that the case?
Yes, that's correct. Through the mayor to council, staff are in agreement with the request for deferral from the consultant. As the information that we received is fairly short notice, we didn't have a chance to review for amendment to the bylaw. And as well, a deferral will allow us to take back the comments from Mr. Schmitz and review whether there's anything that needs to be included or whether the documents that we've requested will look at grading and drainage, as it sounds as though OA's evaluation does include some hydrological elements and drainage. So we'll take a look and see if that's enough or whether there's anything else that needs to be included.
Can I ask, are there, just responding to Mr. Schmitz, are there considerations in terms of land use buffers between agricultural uses and sort of regular sort of residential use? I noted that Mr. Schmitz did say that he endured some sort of property damage. Mr. Schmitz, I don't know if you care to elaborate on that briefly, but I'm trying to unpack that.
Okay, the damage is caused by the water flow that's coming off the property and onto, I know my property and two other adjacent properties to myself. And also damage from the dust, which is probably organic, and the silt caused by the illegal agricultural operations.
Thank you. So Ms. Lanstra, are those things taken into account moving forward?
So sure, when you're typically looking at an agricultural use on a property, it's not a typical conflict between land uses that we're used to. Typically, the agricultural use is less sensitive than a residential use. However, you're typically dealing with maybe less intensive. You're not dealing with the same level of tile drainage that's occurring, and you typically are not dealing with tile drainage over wetlands. As the policies of the official plan and other regulations that we have state that existing agricultural uses are permitted in areas of wetlands, but they are not to remove wetlands in order to occur. And I think that's what we're running into with this application, is that the amount of water that a wetland can hold is now being tile drained out to other areas. That's not typical. But again, we're dealing with a situation where we're trying to react to an incident that occurred and respond. So this gives us an opportunity to take the information that Mr. Schmitz provided and see if there's anything additional we can add.
So just a quick clarification as to that, and would you be coming back with more capacity to influence future agricultural use than what has been the case up to now?
Typically, you don't run into this instance because there already are those controls in our documents. You can't control for people who are not willing to follow them. So already, I would say in place, we don't run into this as much. But with a deferral, we do have the ability, as this is a public meeting, to take the information back and see what other tools we do have that we could address for Mr. Schmidt's concerns.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to recognize Councillor Sullivan next.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. A couple of questions. If you can go back to the slide that showed all the tile drainage, there was a large portion of land that it looked like the tile drainage was indicated in red, and then the others that were in blue. That one, yes, please. So where it says the outlet is, I just want to clarify, all that area in red, is that all tile drained?
From my understanding, yes.
Okay, and is that the area that was considered section 9, I think? Yes, lot 12, concession 9. Is that the red area?
Yes, the neighboring parcel to the west. That is
Okay.
also owned by Mr. Scouten.
Okay, and so the outlet there, that drains all of them, all of that land? That's the common outlet between them all?
Mr. Whitehead, would you happen to know whether that's the same outlet for all of those tile drains?
I'd recommend that we ask Brianna.
And yeah, I'm not entirely sure either.
Okay, all right. And so the large area that's in red was recently all deforested. And my understanding was that there had been a beaver pond in there that is now tile drained. So if all of that kind of goes into that outlet, and then there's more tile drainage to the back with those long blue lines, I just think it's very important that we protect our aquifer and that we protect our wetlands. And so I'm pleased that this is likely going to be deferred, because I really think that we need a really good environmental impact study before we make any kind of decision about this. And that subject land is like a kind of hockey stick shape, but there's another section that is white on the next section, the next slide down. If you move one slide, yeah. So who is it? The same owner then that owns that white area with the to the left of the red subject land? Same owner?
And I could answer that if you want.
Sure.
Through you, Your Worship, the lands, the hatch line is the golf course zoning.
Right.
The white lands on either side are zoned rural, and they're all those lands are owned by Mr. Scouten.
Okay.
And
All right.
agriculture is a permitted use in the rural zone.
Okay, and so the white land on the left of the subject land is also zoned rural. And has it been cleared, or?
It's all been cleared.
It's all been cleared.
Yes. And through Mayor to Council, I will clarify from what Mr. Whitehead has provided that while it is a rural zoning where agriculture is permitted, new agricultural uses still do need to respect boundaries of any natural heritage features that exist, which is why staff is recommending we review those features before we approve the use.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. And it's very unfortunate that an impact of the wetlands is difficult to get the true impact because the land was all disturbed prior to this. So very unfortunate, but anyway, I'm happy that we're going to defer it and get more information.
So Ms. Leinster, just to clarify, if there is a deferral of the recommended way forward, will we trigger another public meeting, or is this the only public meeting on this file?
Through you to Council, this would be the only required public meeting for this application. We can notify those who are in attendance that would like to be present when there's a decision being made, but there is no formal requirement for us to notify when it comes back to be considered.
Okay. Okay, council colleagues, any other questions? It's obviously a complex file. I note that our planner and Deputy Director of Planning, Ms. Lanstra, and Mr. Whitehead and colleagues, as well as Mr. Schmitz, have, I think, noted significant impacts and the complex terrain that has arisen owing to previous uses of the land and its location in rural areas is not, I think, lost on any of us. That being said, I think we all support the deferral, and it is getting late. So I'm going to ask Ms. Babcock-Cormier. And Ms. Babcock-Cormier, is there a formal motion that we would adopt to formalize that deferral?
I would require a motion to formalize that deferral, as well as the mechanism for bringing it back
Before
to
I go
council.
there, sorry, I forgot I was still in the public meeting. So I'm going to do a last call for interventions. I think we just have Mr. Schmitz and Diane Schmitz here with us this evening. Is there any last interventions by the public? I'm not seeing any. Is there any last intervention by the applicant's representative?
Okay,
Oh,
hello.
I'm sorry.
Council?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Michelle Hodgson. I live across the road from the Schmitzes, and I also am very opposed to this, and I would very much appreciate a deferral and an environmental evaluation. Yeah, there's nothing left here. It's been completely clear cut. And yeah, and I would like to be notified as well. I can write a letter to council with my contact information. I would like to know how this goes forward and the end result. Thank you very much.
And if you could just say your name and your address for the public record so we can communicate with you.
Sure. It's Michelle Hodgson, 1428 Limerick Road, Oxford Station, K0G1T0.
Great, thank you. So we've
Okay,
captured
thanks.
that information and we'll be sure to have our planning staff reach back out to you. So appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Ms. Lancher, I trust you have that?
Yes,
And
I do.
all those who were present this evening will be notified accordingly.
Correct.
Okay. So anything else from the applicant before we close the public meeting? The applicant's representatives? Okay, I'm not seeing anything.
No, we're fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Whitehead. So with that, I will go to Ms. Babcock-Cormier and she will read us the language for the deferral, please.
Thank you. And so just to confirm, the public meeting is closed at 9:26 p.m. With respect to the deferral, we would need a time with respect to the matter to be brought back. So would that be at once an environmental impact study is completed, reviewed and assessed by staff?
Ms. Lancer or Ms. Martin, can you advise?
Through you to council, the original motion was to include it in the holding provision. It does sound like it would be helpful to have prior to the decision, and it sounds like that is what we're hearing from council. So I would put it back maybe to council if that's what you would like to see, if staff could have that direction, so we could work with the applicants to get something to bring forward.
So Ms. Lancer, that would include the environmental impact information or not?
Staff can do whatever council would like us to do. Okay. So if that's what you would like to direct us to do, then by all means, staff support information up front where we can get it and we can work with the applicants to have that.
Right. So I think at council, to that end, I think we're directing staff to come back upon gathering far more substantial information about environmental impacts. I understand environmental impact studies can take some time, but I believe the appetite of council is that it would be premature to consider this file until we have that information. Do I have that sentiment right, colleagues?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so can I look for a mover and a seconder? I do recognize Councilor Barkley, so I'll recognize you, and then I'm looking for a mover and seconder. Councilor Barkley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment since you were asking. I'd be in support of that direction to staff. I mean, I have serious concerns about the history of development of these lands and the fact that we're dealing with existing conditions. And I really am concerned that the applicants contractors have described the wetlands as having limited value, and I would like to have a third party confirm whether or not that's true through an environmental impact study. So I'm in support of the direction. Thanks.
Okay, so Ms. Babcock-Cormier, can the motion be updated to reflect that, please?
Yes, it can. So currently it's that consideration of bylaw 21-22 be deferred until further information concerning the environmental impact of the proposal is reviewed and assessed by staff. Will that do?
Colleagues, does that sound good to you? I'm looking for a mover and a seconder.
Environmental impact study, I think that's a...
Including an environmental impact study.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. So I have Councillor Strachan and Councillor Barclay, is that right? Okay. My question is, Ms. Lanster, uses as they are right now don't stop, correct? So the cash cropping that has occurred for quite some time continues.
No,
Is that right?
so only permitted uses can occur on the lands right now, which is currently a golf course and a park, as Mr. Schmitz has provided. So those uses for agricultural uses are not permitted on the subject lands until such time as it is considered by council. So they would not be permitted to occur until—
And they have not occurred. My understanding is they have not occurred. Is that right?
From our understanding, they have been paused since they have been spoken to with the municipality.
Okay. Okay, great. That's helpful. I just wasn't quite sure what the status was. Thank you. Okay, so with that in mind, we have a mover and a seconder. We have a motion. We have instructions around timing. Council colleagues, is there anything else on this? Okay, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor, please. Good. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. We have, I think, one other item in on our agenda rather, and that is Equinel Phase 5. Council, it's 9:30, so we can have Ms. Martin do her presentation. If there's an appetite to defer, if the information is overly complex or there's a lot of questions, that's always available to us. Perhaps, unless there's an objection, I'll ask Ms. Martin to proceed with her presentation. But I would say, I think, as some of you know, we've been meeting now for almost 4 hours. And I'm not sure how much bandwidth is left, Ms. Martin. So why don't you begin your presentation and we'll see where we get, unless council colleagues, you feel strongly that we should end the meeting now. I don't see that objection, so I'll ask Ms. Martin to proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll just go to the next slide, please. So Equinel Phase 5 received draft plan approval back on December 22nd, 2020. So they've had draft plan approval for a little over a year and a bit now. There was revisions to the draft plan back in November of 18 that accommodated some lot line adjustments to the development. Equinel has provided the necessary documentation as required as per their draft plan approval to address the development of the subdivision. This includes civil drawings, stormwater management reports, landscaping plans, reference plans, their updated draft M plan. So they've worked their way through the requirements that they need to get the development going. Council approved a pre-servicing agreement for this development, I want to say November of last year. So ahead of the subdivision agreement, they've gone ahead and installed the water and sanitary services and the roads to a point where they're getting close to preliminary approval for these lots, for this part of the subdivision to start development. Next slide, please. So here's the just the phase. So there's phase 5 is actually a little bit larger than what you're seeing on the draft M plan. So Equinel is breaking it up into 3 parts. I'm not controlling the screen, but to what you see there is Oakmont Drive that comes at Royal Inn Gate. Yeah, Jessica, if you just take your cursor over, yeah, go just to the left. That's the park. So that's the park that Equinel built, just to give you context as to where we're at in phase 5. To the east, there is a kind of just that larger chunk of white space that would be phase 5B that will be subject to a subsequent subdivision agreement for the development of that area. And then 5C, which is everything to the left of Oakmont Drive, would be subject again to another subdivision agreement to permit those to be developed. Next slide, please. So staff are confident that we can authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the subdivision agreement, as Equinel has worked very diligently to provide us with the information required for the subdivision agreement. And at this stage, the agreement is just the formality of entrenching all of the conditions of draft plan approval and the engineering requirements into a document that is registered on Untitled and is bound to all those lots within the subdivision agreement. And of course, we always provide that further legal review by our municipal solicitor on all agreements, even after approval is done, just to ensure that our documents are legally sound. Next slide, please. I don't know if there's anything else after this slide. There isn't. I'm just, so just quickly, one of the questions I've had raised through members of councils in regard to landscaping and tree clearing within this property, within phase 5. Phase 5 is an urban plan of subdivision. So typically you don't see a lot of retention of any vegetation that is on the property, just given the higher density of development and the civil works required for the subdivision. So that would include your roads, your drainage easements, stormwater management features, and so forth. So I will share the landscaping plan for this phase, just to give council a bit of an idea of what efforts are being taken to provide additional greenery and landscaping space. So we do require 1 tree per lot when it comes to planting and landscaping within the subdivision. Equinel phase 5 it has provided for a bit more of a higher density and smaller lots. So again, trying to address, and this was addressed during their approval for draft plan for the subdivision, which feels like a while ago. I think it was in September 2020 when it came forward for presentation and back to council in December 2020. So they're proposing that where lots where they cannot accommodate a tree in front, they are compensating by adding additional trees along areas. And I'll zoom in a bit because I can appreciate that this is very small scale, large scale, sorry. So on the exterior lots of developments, they're providing extra planting just to compensate for that. So to that end, what they've done with their landscaping plan in the subdivision is they've ensured that throughout the development itself, they are maintaining that 1 tree per lot. There's also the provision, and I'm just going to zoom out again, might not be able to see it. So here you can see the stormwater management pond. There is a passive park in behind that will be maintained, and that area I believe is treed as well. And then if I'm just going to skip down because it is a large plan, here's just the other portion of phase 5 as it wraps around. So here's the park as well. And we've also been in discussions with Equinel to see if there's the opportunity for some more tree plantings within the subdivision. I know they were within the park itself, sorry. I know that they're very interested in providing more greenery where they can. So that was definitely something that was part of our discussions at the staff level with Equinel. So as you can see, without going into the detail, and I know there's a lot more detail in this plan, and it certainly can be circulated through council just for, further up closer review, just given that it's a large PDF of the different types of species that are planted and just the location of where those trees are. So to that end, at this stage, staff are at the point of recommending that we enter into the subdivision agreement again to entrench all of the documents, including the civil engineering drawings, landscaping plan, and reference plans that that have gone before staff and have received our sign off from our, based on our standards that we work with internally. And we're at the point now where they're, getting close to permit issuance where they want to start building houses. So this is at this point, the formality of just authorizing the entering into of the agreement.
Ms. Martin, just a couple of things, and then I'll recognize Councillor Barkley. Are affordable housing provisions part of the authorization of this phase this evening? My other question is, and we know, and we heard loud and clear from the community when parcels of land were being cleared in anticipation of this phase or future phases, particularly for Equinel, that neighbors and properties in the Settlers Grant area, in the River Road area, and within Equinel itself, we're expressing some concern. We absolutely value Equinel as a good partner, a good developer, so we're not diminishing the quality of their work. But I think the reality is some of the impacts may not have been necessarily well anticipated, certainly by individual properties in particular neighborhoods. So to that end, it's good to see the tree and landscaping plans. I'm not sure where we stand with that site alteration bylaw. However, would that site alteration bylaw inform how Equinel clears trees in the future and assesses impacts? Obviously, the draft plan for phase 5 was already adopted, but I'm asking really about future phases in terms of how do we work with Equinel to make sure that impacts are diminished, especially on neighboring properties as much as within the subdivision itself. And then go ahead.
So I'll answer the first part on the site alteration, and then I'll jump to your question on the affordable housing piece. So the site alteration bylaw, when when presented to council, when it does come forward, would regulate the preemptive clearing of land. Equinel, as part of their plan of subdivision, would be required to provide an environmental impact study. They would be required to address tree preservation if required. Certainly, as I mentioned, the landscaping plan was a requirement for their development. So they've gone through the process. That part is addressed as part of the plan of subdivision already, is what they're required to submit. The site alteration bylaw would prevent that preemptive clearing, which has been a major concern of members of the community as well as councils, from just clearing the trees without doing the necessary studies in regards to what's there and documenting if there's any environmentally sensitive features. On Equinel's standpoint, I haven't been around since the very first day as to when they started developing, but I can certainly say that when it comes to their plans of subdivision submissions, they're typically great at providing the documentation required. Previous meetings, and I don't want to speak for Equinel itself, because they certainly can come and speak to council, but I do recall the planner for regional group who works with Equinel mentioned that they were taking some additional steps and measures to inform neighbors when certain activities were happening on the property, and that they would do their best to try and preserve trees that abutted neighboring residential properties that were not part of the Equinel development itself. I don't know if you have any further follow-up on that point. I can address the affordable housing piece.
Go ahead on the affordability.
Yep. So if you recall back when we went through the zoning exercise to address the development within Equinel phase 5 and through the draft conditions recognize that an affordability report be provided, which Equinel has given us. And a big piece of that is they were to create or offered to 25% of the lots within phase 5 the option of having an additional residential unit. So what Equinel has done is that they have provided us with not us, but their clients or their potential buyers with a model, and it's offered to all the larger lots that can support, the 40-foot lots, which have a little more room to support a house with an additional residential unit. So they created a specific model that they're marketing as part of this phase, and will continue to market as part of subsequent phases, is my understanding, but I can get clarification on that. They also created smaller lots to allow for smaller houses, and this phase includes the provisions of a lot more townhouses in subsequent phases. So again, trying to offer that diversity of housing that's not just that single family dwelling, but other types of entry housing that people would have the option of purchasing, including smaller housing.
And how is that being tracked, Ms. Martin?
So on the additional residential unit side, we would capture that at the building permit stage, but certainly we have asked for reporting back from Equinel itself on when they sell a unit. So the timing between them actually selling a unit and getting a permit can vary. So if they can provide us with that information sooner, we're just able to just capture that data, but certainly capturing it through the building permit process as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'll go to Councillor Barclay.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Martin. Two related questions, so I'll ask them together. But I just wanted to echo what the mayor said about how responsive Equinel and the regional group is to some of the important issues that council has, including the affordable housing and tree preservation or responding to our desire to see more trees and concern about the urban canopy. So my questions are, first of all, I'm recalling back, and it was quite a while ago, to our discussions about the draft plan of agreement, and is it usual to break it into parts? I mean, we're talking about phase 5 was part of the draft plan approval, as I recall, and now we're looking at just a section of it. And the related question is, I seem to recall from the draft plan of approval that the park was in a different part of phase 5. Has that moved? Just if you could refresh my memory.
In regards to the park, through your worship to Councillor Barclay, the park hasn't moved. It's part of what would be classified as phase 5C. It's just a little further to the west than what's currently being developed. And certainly development in phases is a planning practice and can occur. It has happened in subsequent phases for the Equinel developments, in which case we have many just keeping up with them some days, many different, phase 2A, 2B, 2C, 2G, phase 4BC, phase 4AI, and it's just their way of parceling up their development as to how they move forward. Certainly, it's just additional agreements that need to be registered on title for those lots, but it's process at the end of the day.
So the draft plan approval was for all of phase 5, not just?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and sorry, and it would still apply to those lots as they come forward as well.
But tonight's meeting is only on a section of phase 5. Is that right, Ms. Martin?
That is correct, Your Worship. What we're calling phase 5A.
That's right. And that's where once, should we adopt the recommendation this evening, permits can be issued for the building of those homes, correct?
So conditional permits could be contemplated. It also requires the provision of preliminary approval on the engineering side, and I believe that we are getting close. And I know that Equinel is eager to get some shovels in the ground to continue developing, as there's strong interest in just building within their subdivision. So there's two elements. There's the subdivision agreement itself, but as well as the engineering side, giving them the go ahead that they can at least pull conditional permits.
Okay, great. And certainly, while I want to again acknowledge Councillor Barclay's comments about the responsiveness of Equinel, I also would I need to highlight that we have fielded a number of calls from residents in the area outside of Equinel who have been impacted, who have concerns about the fate of trees in particular. And while Equinel is always, of course, very motivated to respond to residents, in some cases there simply is no resolution, as we know, and trees are lost, and that is what it is. So I'm looking forward to working with Equinel, who is an excellent partner, on how we can prevent some of that preemptive clearing if it's not necessary, and maybe build in some better buffers, because obviously the landscape of North Grenville and Kentville is changing, and we know that tree canopy is particularly important. So any other questions, colleagues? I'm not seeing any. Heather, do you mind reading the recommendation this evening, please?
Yes, Your Worship. The recommendation is that Council authorize the Director of Planning and Development to sign the subdivision agreement for Equinel Phase 5, subject to further review by the municipal solicitor.
Okay. And Ms. Martin, is there a reason Equinel isn't here this evening? I know they often come in case there are questions.
I did follow up with one of the planners at regional today, and I can follow up again. I'm not certain if it was just availability, but at this point, again, the subdivision agreement is that formality of just recognizing that they've satisfied our conditions. So that may be a reason as to why at this point all those questions would have been addressed at the draft plan approval stage. So anything extra just in regards to concerns raised by neighbors, again, staff are also very responsive in being able to provide that feedback to Equinel, and certainly they've been very quick to address them as they arise. So there might be just another venue in which we could have conversations over those concerns.
Indeed. Okay, a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Wilson, Councillor O'Sullivan, please. The mover and a seconder. Any final comments, questions? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Thank you. That carries. So we'll move on. Thankfully, we are near the end. I don't see any correspondence. There are no other departmental reports, no other business. I believe, Councillor Barkley, you do have a notice of motion. Is that correct? Okay. Could you read that, please?
Yeah, sure, certainly. That council requests that the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville review the speed limit of County Road 20 between County Road 18 and McDonald Road, and consider reducing that speed limit from 80 kilometers per hour to 60 kilometers per hour.
Thank you. This is just a notice of motion. This has arisen from an issue that we are dealing with a resident who lives on the precipice of a very large curve, and there have been some concerns about pedestrian safety and road safety overall. So in discussions with the counties, as well as with Director Dunlop, we believe this may be the best way to proceed. And that's the context for the notice of motion. And I thank Councillor Barkley for bringing it forward. So it is just a notice of motion. It'll be discussed at the next meeting. Thank you, Councillor Barkley. Any other notices of motion of which I am not aware? I'm not seeing anything. Okay, I believe we've dealt with all the bylaws this evening. Is that correct, Ms. Backwell-Cormier?
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
All right.
And there's just the matter under other business with respect to appointments with respect to certain committees.
Indeed. Okay. So let's deal with that then. Going to other business, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to highlight the fact that in closed session, Council has appointed Councillor Wilson to the position on the BIA and the Chamber, the Health, Wellness and Fitness Advisory Committee, and with respect to CDAC as the Council Liaison, and Councillor O'Sullivan with respect to the Tourism Subcommittee.
Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
No mover and seconder required.
Okay.
Your Worship, it was already dealt with. It's just bringing it out into the open session.
I see. You're just reporting an outcome. Okay.
Yes, please.
Ratification. Okay, good. Thank you. We'll go to any questions from members of the community or the media, please.
I confirm that I have no questions from the media or from the public that have not already been addressed, Your Worship.
Okay, great. Then we'll move to adjournment. And we are 9:53 PM this evening. I'll look for a mover and a seconder.
Sorry, Your Worship, and confirmation bylaw.
You do want the confirmation.
Sorry, I do.
Go ahead.
Okay, so confirmation bylaw that bylaw 22-22 to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on March 9, 2022 be adopted as passed.
Indeed. We're in a seconder. Councillor Sullivan. I need a seconder, please. Councillor Barkley. And that is for the confirmation bylaw. All in favor, colleagues? Good. And now a motion to adjourn at 9:53 PM. Councillor Wilson, seconder, please. Councillor, who did I just say? Councillor Wilson, Councillor O'Sullivan. Okay, thank you. And I'll call the question on adjournment at 9:53 PM. Thank you very much, colleagues. A long but substantial meeting. Appreciate your colleagues. Thank you to staff. And we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody. Very
Good
productive.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Turning off the cameras, turning off the recording.